Welcome in to Check the Mic, Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube once again, Wednesday time for our preview of the AFC and NFC West. We've been going team by team. It's all brought to you by FanDuel, and we are coming at you from the Antonio Cromartie studio in part with Huggies. We are halfway through the league, Monday and Tuesday. If you missed those shows, we're knocking them all out this week. Season previews.
Knocking them out.
North on Monday, East on Tuesday. Today, the Wests, and then tomorrow, the Souths.
Yeah, busy, surprising people with shows on days they're not supposed to be on.
Yeah, we apologize for that. Little, inconsistency, but it's like we gotta get it all out.
I don't apologize. It's a bonus.
It's a bonus. You're right.
It's a gift.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
They should be thanking us.
It's going to be a little bit of a come down next week, though. Like only back to 2 shows, and then we're back to season mode with 3 the following week. So those are your scheduling updates. So we've been going team by team, given about 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes we ramble a little bit more. You ready to do this thing?
Sure.
We are starting in the AFC West with the Denver Broncos. Broncos, the AFC West champions, dethroning the Kansas City Chiefs for the first time in quite a while. So the Broncos are returning AFC West champions. They go to the AFC Championship last year and unfortunately had that Bo Nix injury, which, if he's healthy, it could have been the Super Bowl representative in the AFC.
Yeah, even Bill Simmons said that they would have beaten the Patriots. Like, that's how good this Denver team is, that even Bill Simmons is willing to say, you know what, Bo Nix plays that game, they're beating the Patriots. Mr. Patriots homer himself was willing to go that far.
If we take a step back, let me take a step back on the Broncos here, and set the tone for what the last few years have looked like and the job that they have done. George Payton and Sean Payton, GM and head coach, they were in a tough spot a few years ago, right when Sean Payton got there. Roster-wise, it was not looking good. Remember the beginning of the 2023 season, they were the historically bad defense. They gave up 70 to the Miami Dolphins. Their first 7-8 games of the year, they were on a pace to break every futility record defensively. But since the middle of the 2023 season, the defense has been one of the league's best. And I think Payton in the offense, Sean Payton in the offense, after getting Bo Nix, they've slowly gotten better and better and better. And so every time we break down the Broncos now in the offseason, it is now like draft needs. I don't know. Like there's not a ton to fill to the point where they could trade their first rounder for Jalen Waddle at wide receiver. And we're looking at right now one of the better rosters in the NFL. And it's been that way the last 2 seasons.
It has, yeah. I mean, they've been in really good shape. We keep going to these sort of roster breakdowns, rankings, blah, blah, blah. And it's like there aren't holes on this Denver team. There's some areas where you might quibble with some depth or say, yeah, they could upgrade this spot. But, you're trying to find starters, that could come in and replace players. And there aren't any, really. And so, you get a free agent period like this year where they don't really do anything for ages. Everyone's going to, panicking. Denver's not making any moves. Because what are they bringing in? And then they swing and bring in Jalen Waddle in a trade. And you're like, wow. They did basically nothing because they didn't really have much to do. And then they make a trade, and suddenly you've transformed the wide receiver core so that it's Jalen Waddle and then Cortland Sutton as number 2, and then, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, all those other guys, Pat Bryant, as the sort of lower down pieces on the depth chart. Suddenly that receiving group looks fantastic. It's just a really good team that's going to come down to, this enigma at quarterback that is Bo Nix, where, we've been talking about for a while, there's a whole bunch of quarterbacks where nobody's able to agree on them. They're polarizing, they're all over the place. That only gets worse when you talk about a quarterback who is particularly difficult to pin down in terms of what he is. It's hard enough to get everyone to agree on a guy who, generally speaking, plays more or less the same every week or in a very sort of defined style, and he's got, easy to see strengths and weaknesses. Bo Nix is a very enigmatic quarterback to begin with, and that only, turbocharges the kind of divide that you get on him.
I think part of the reason for that for Bo Nix is the fact that, like you said, it's not like any quarterback where if you're putting rankings together is going to be somewhere in the I always use top 8 as a cutoff. If you were going to rank him anywhere from 9 to 20, they're all going to be debatable, right? It's probably a healthy debate whether they should be 9 or should be 20, and there's probably cases on both sides. But Nix in particular, I think because for instance, if you just looked at, say, some PFF grading, and there's a whole lot of red and orange in there, which is not good, but then there's a whole lot of green in there. Like it's not consistent. It's inconsistent week to week, right? And so quarterbacks who are in the middle class, so to speak, give both sides a lot of fodder, either on either end. So let's be realistic about all of it. I think the Broncos are thrilled with what they've gotten from Bo Nix so far through 2 years. I've been very impressed with his ability to make throws in crunch time. It's not necessarily a formula that you want to lean into where your offense sleepwalks for 3 quarters and then all of a sudden the fourth quarter comes to life. But there's something to that at least, right? Caleb Williams has had elements of that. We've talked about the Eagles having an offense that disappears at times, and they've won a lot of games, both teams, and the Bears last year. But Nix's ability to use his legs when he needs to
has been huge.
Absolutely huge. Sack avoidance. Part of that, we talk about the rest of what they've done roster-wise, the continuity and how well their offensive line has played. And now you add Jalen Waddle to this wide receiver core where Courtland Sutton's already really good. You add Waddle and his speed, and I think now, okay, wide receivers 3 and 4, and the Marvin Mims and Troy Franklins and Pat Bryants of the world, all of a sudden you've got some great depth at receiver because, one of the criticisms of the Broncos would be, Nix and Troy Franklin not being on the same page, or do you have anyone dependable opposite Courtland Sutton? I feel like they've ticked a lot of those boxes this offseason.
Yeah, they really have. I mean, it's a strong roster. Adding a guy like Jalen Waddle is a massive move over the course of an offseason that can transform an offense that was already fine. And they're very low in terms of weaknesses. So, I mean, they look like I think they're a bit of a slept-on team at the moment because I don't see that many people talking about them as like Super Bowl contenders, Super Bowl favorites. Obviously, the Rams are kind of in their own category in terms of what they've done and how far ahead of the pack they position themselves as a favorite in that conference. I think the AFC is a bit more wide open anyway, but I don't think you're seeing the same kind of hype for Denver as you are for other teams. Maybe it's just the uncertainty with Bo Nix relative to a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, like proven MVP caliber quarterbacks. But I do feel like they're flying under the radar a little bit.
So I think a part of that is they were 11-3 last year in one-score games. I can't remember if they had one. Did the Raiders? Was that the Chiefs? I think the Raiders had like a late field goal that was completely irrelevant with no time left to like make it a one-score game to affect that, which is dumb. But either way, there was a lot of close games last year. So I think that might be part of it. Plus, you have a very competitive division. Everybody's expecting the Chiefs to bounce back. The Chargers look like they're going to be very good again, and they were a playoff team last year. I would assume that's a big part of where people might not be giving the Broncos credit, but 9.5 is their over/under. That's less than the Chiefs.
And it's 2 games lower than the kind of the elite of the conference that we've been talking about, right? Like the high watermark of these teams that we're putting out there is 11.5, and they're not. So 2 games back is significant sort of level of disrespect from the man in Vegas.
So I think, again, we get a lot of Broncos fans. They're going to tune in just to hear this. I've said this before on the show, but let me say it, right? Like Bo Nix is the 3rd best quarterback in the division, right? So that's a part of it, right? You wouldn't rank him ahead of Mahomes, certainly. Now, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people who tune in and say, well, of course he's better than Justin Herbert. He's at least won a playoff game, and he's better in the playoffs, Bo Nix, right? But, man, I don't think you're, in a redraft of NFL quarterbacks, you're probably not taking Bo Nix over Justin Herbert. So I don't think that's being disrespectful. But what Denver's advantage is Bo Nix is certainly good enough. We've seen that his ability to go in and win big-time road games, to play well in the playoffs, to beat a team like Buffalo at home in the playoffs. But it's because of their roster depth, because of how good their defense has been. So let's go through that a little bit more. Offensive line-wise, they're returning all of their starters again. They've been incredibly consistent. We talk about continuity a lot on the offensive line. Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, Mike McGlinchey. I mean, that's like 3 out of 5 where you would rank those players at the top 5-ish, at their 5 to 8 at their position. Like McGlinchey's a top 5 to 8 right tackle. Miners is one of the best guards in the league. Garrett Bowles, one of the best left tackles in the league. And then Powers and Wattenberg are good, and they're all returning. So that's the starting point. They've invested in the offensive line. They've been consistently good there. And now I think the playmaker situation with Waddle there completely changes what they're able to do. I think the one other thing that might be lacking, though, is the consistency from the run game. You have year 2 of R.J. Harvey. You have J.K. Dobbins once again trying to stay healthy, where every time he's out there, he looks like an explosive threat. But, man, if they get them going as a 1-2 punch, there's not a lot of weaknesses on this offense.
Yeah.
As long as Bo Nix is, hitting his throws. Like, there are times where he's a little streaky with his accuracy and his footwork. If he could tidy that up, then I think it's a very good offense.
And now Jonah Coleman obviously added to the backfield as well in the draft.
I love Jonah Coleman.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a question mark area. Like, I kind of like all 3 of those players, but they're not as proven as A, the level of some of the other elements of the roster, and B, I guess, other backfields. So, yeah, it's definitely an area that you would want to see improvement from. I guess you could make the same argument with tight end. Like, Evan Engram's fine, but he's not, a massive difference maker for them necessarily. So it's not like this roster is flawless or there aren't areas where you could improve. But there's no kind of glaring weakness or fallibility to it, I think. The Knicks thing is interesting, though, because I think you're right. He's the 3rd best quarterback in the division, and, TBD, let's see what Mendoza does. He might be the 4th pretty quickly. But, it's like he's not – you can't just plug him into a box and say this is who he is because – I mean, look at the Buffalo game in the playoffs, right? Like, he's capable of playing high-level games against high-level teams on the biggest stage and being a reason they win those games.
Yep.
So it's like, like if you were a betting man going into any random Sunday, who would you rather have, Mahomes, Herbert, Bo Nix? You're never picking Bo Nix. But that doesn't mean in any of those random Sundays that Bo Nix wouldn't play better than either of those 2 guys, or even just in the 4th quarter, right? Like late in the game, when it's a 1-score game because the defense is so good and it's held them in there, that Bo Nix turns it on and is the reason they win those games. So in a vacuum, he's definitely worse than those guys, but the rest of the team around him is good enough. Sean Payton is good enough, and he is good enough in individual plays, in individual sort of streaks, in critical situations that he can still be the reason they're winning games, just as Mahomes is the reason the Chiefs are winning games and Herbert is. Like, it's a complicated kind of evaluation.
Before we get to the defense, the Sean Payton thing is also a big story, right? In a world where you have this group of elite quarterbacks who have now mostly retired, or Aaron Rodgers still holding on, the Brady, Manning, Breeze, and Rodgers era, where they were the clear, first ballot Hall of Famers and elite quarterbacks of that generation, and you see, Brady move on, and Bill Belichick, his head coach, can't have the same success without him. It was a question about Sean Payton, right? Like, okay, what does he do without Drew Brees? Now, the difference with Payton is even when he had Brees, they didn't always win, right? They had some awful defenses. They had some 7-win seasons, but they were one of the better teams in the league more often than not. I think Sean Payton has shown a lot in this, in his second job, and he has his hand in personnel, and I think it's a big feather in Payton's cap what he's been able to do to get Bo Nix, to develop him, and you see the offense adding more pieces. It started at the end of Bo Nix's rookie season. I think you see Sean Payton more comfortable with what he's able to put on Bo Nix's plate, and I just think it's a really impressive job by Sean Payton as a head coach, because you don't really know how well someone's going to coach when they're not blessed with the quarterback, when they don't have that, right? When Mike McCarthy goes somewhere else, when Bill Belichick doesn't have Brady. And now you get to see that. And I think I've been very impressed with Sean Payton as a head coach outside of the Drew Brees era.
Yeah, and honestly, Sean Payton's resume is looking pretty crazy at this point. Like we talked before, he always had this sort of surprisingly good record when in games where Drew Brees was missing, right? And they had to go to somebody else for a while. But it was a small sample size. It was a handful of games that he was able to win. And you can kind of put that down to variance or whatever. But if you sort of extend his career, like – there was a couple of minute clip that Drew Brees did. I think was it with the Kelseys with New Heights, where he was sort of, I don't know if this was just how he's reframed it in his brain or if this was what he thinks actually happened, but he was kind of revisiting history of him going to New Orleans as opposed to the Dolphins way back when in that 2006 offseason. And part of this was like sort of reconditioning a little bit. I turned him down, When I saw things in New Orleans and thought this is bigger than football, It's like, this is at the same time their doctors were saying his shoulder's in pieces. There's a 25% chance he ever plays again. Walk away, right? And the other thing he kind of reconditioned in his brain is like, the Dolphins had Nick Saban. Meanwhile, the Saints had this nobody, Sean Payton. Nobody'd ever heard of him. It's like, Sean Payton was a pretty big deal at that point. Like
he was the young hotshot offensive coordinator.
That's the thing. Like when he was hired for the Saints, this was not some nobody that the Saints had just like stumbled into as a head coach. Like he had been the guy. Now look, the record of those guys is hit and miss, right? Sometimes you're going to get Sean McVay. Sometimes you're going to get Brad Childress, right? You never know which way the sort of the hot coaching ticket is going to go. But Sean Payton was that guy, built off at that point what was already a pretty impressive resume. Like he'd been the quarterback coach and the OC for the Giants, and they'd been really good during those years. And then he'd coached the offense coordinator for the Cowboys, right? And that offense had been cooking, obviously. So he had already built up, A, a pretty good record of coaching, and B, some impressive quarterback performances before he got anywhere near Drew Brees. And then obviously they went to the moon as a combination. And then everything sort of outside of Drew Brees. Like, at this point, Sean Payton's resume as an offensive coach is pretty freaking good.
Yeah, so I think that's worth noting because you don't always know what they're going to do outside of the trust tree of the elite quarterback.
Like everyone sort of acknowledges, Sean Payton's a really good coach, but he never gets talked about in the Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan type of conversation, and he probably should be.
Yeah, and I think that's because all the other guys, you got to see it with multiple quarterbacks, right? I mean, Shanahan's the most obvious one. It's
but my point is,
look at Jimmy G, look at Brock Purdy, and look at all these.
I guess my point is, we have seen that with Payton as well. We just sort of laser focus too much on the Brees thing, which is the majority of his career. Admittedly,
no, that's fair.
That obviously sways it, right? Like Sean Payton plus Drew Brees equaled, all-time levels
one
of
the
offense.
Best offenses in the league.
Right. But if you go looking for, well, what has Payton done outside of Brees? Unlike Belichick, where you could say, outside of Brady, we've had some real concerns here. You can't really find the same problems for Payton. It's like outside of Brees, it still looks good.
And I think what I'm saying is the last 3 years have helped prove that.
Burnish that, right.
You put him into that category. So I think that was at least worth acknowledging. Let's talk about the defense a little bit here.
And also, by the way, again, it's always hard to discern actual who's in the driving seat and who's making these decisions. But like theoretically, Bo Nix was Sean Payton's. Like I've identified that guy. I saw the backpack. It's nothing but football. He's my guy. I mean, if this continues, if this trend continues, and Bo Nix is going to be a very good quarterback for the Broncos. Not only is it a feather in Sean Payton's cap because he's coaching him up, right, and he's producing that offense, but theoretically he also ID'd the guy. Like he also went, that's my guy. If he A, identified him, and then B, was right about it, I mean, it's only adding.
Even though he was QB 6 drafted that
year. Right,
I
mean, maybe he didn't have a choice, but theoretically, the narrative is Payton identified that guy and coached him up, and he's a really good player now. I mean, if that's the case, again, it's only adding to Payton's legacy and reputation.
So on the defensive side of the ball now, we mentioned, a couple of years ago they looked awful, and then it just slowly got better and better and better. Vance Joseph's done a really nice job on that side of the ball. I've called it a defense that's solid across the board and maybe devoid of stars outside of Pat Surtain, but I think I would walk that back a little bit now because you've got Nick Bonito, the way he's emerged the last, year and a half or so and become one of the better, more consistent pass rushers in the NFL. I've just been so impressed with their ability to get pressure, both with a four-man rush. They pick their spots when they're trying to blitz and get after it. They play sticky man coverage on the back end. My one concern with their defense, I thought they showed some weakness in some big games and second half of the season. And defense, it's really tough to play top 5 defense over and over and over again. That's the one side of the ball where it's like, even if the personnel is the same, it's really tough to just consistently always be top 3 to 5. Can they maintain this level of play? Because almost everybody's back. The one big question mark is Jonathan Cooper. Like they lose John Franklin Myers, and then Jonathan Cooper has had his some off-field issues. So this defensive line, which is usually rolling 6 to 8 deep, chipped away at with some depth this offseason.
The Cooper thing is definitely a one to monitor because he reported to camp along with everybody else, so it's not like he's immediately out of the picture. What was his thing? He got arrested for domestic violence of some kind, right? So yeah, that's a big variable here. If they do lose him, if he does get suspended, if the legal process unfolds quickly and suddenly they're without him, that could be a pretty big blow. But as of right now, record time or training camp report time, he's there. I mean, he's part of this team.
But yeah, so most of them are back, and they've got an excellent secondary led by Surtain, who can match up with the league's best. You have Riley Moss opposite him. I know you've always been a Riley Moss fan, even when he's picked on. I still think Jahdae Barron adds some very good depth, even though he didn't look great as a rookie. Didn't necessarily have a ton of opportunities, but they're deep there. Solid group of safeties with Brandon Jones and Hufanga. I mean, they're good across the board. They bring back Alex Singleton at linebacker. I guess my one concern would be they've been some of the parts type of defensive line, right? Zach Allen, Benito, Cooper, John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, Malcolm Roach. It's a very good group. But if you lose a Cooper, if you can't like for like replace John Franklin Myers, don't forget our guy Q Robinson is out there as a Jonathan Cooper replacement and adding more depth. So I love the way they've built it up, and I think they'll be very good there. But just keep an eye on what happens with Cooper. So I think they're in a good spot again this year, Sam.
Agreed.
Good coaching, good offense, year 3 quarterback. Look, to just put a bow on the Bo Nix conversation, I don't think he's had a season where you'd say, hey, look at what Jaden Daniels did as a rookie. That's one of the best rookie seasons we've seen in a while. Or Drake May in year 2, where he goes and is number 2 in the MVP race. But for a rookie, or for 2 straight years, Bo Nix as a rookie, solid, year 2, solid. Like it's a very good start to your career. He just hasn't had the full season highs of a Jaden Daniels, of a Drake May. But you'll take that for a first-round quarterback, what he's done now heading into year 3. We should be able to expect even more growth from him.
You would. The only concern, like the problem with things like that, and this is a little bit Caleb Williams as well, though I think he's further ahead and better. When some of the things that you're listing as like current strengths are typically the sort of the volatile, the unsustainable type of stuff. Like when you start talking about clutch magic and big time throws and, all those kind of crazy things, those tend to be the things that evaporate and are very difficult to sustain year on year. So as much as you're like, and I'm not saying there's nothing to them. Like I think there was an element of clutch ability to Tom Brady throughout his career, right? But a lot of guys where you start talking about them being clutch, it tends to be built off the back of like 5 plays. And then if those 5 plays don't happen again next time around, well, then they're not clutch anymore. It's like, well, was he ever clutch, or did he just make 5 plays that happened to be in clutch situations? And, so Bo Nix has been a really big, important part of this team, winning some games in some really high leverage situations, in some clutch situations, late in games, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that's something that he's going to have, but maybe it isn't. And if that sort of disappears, well, then he needs to pick up the other elements of his game, or he needs to get further ahead in the first 3 quarters so he doesn't need to do those things in the fourth quarter. I'm just saying, like Carson Wentz's 2017 MVP caliber season, right? All the way through that year, we were like, okay, he's playing really well, but be careful now because this is all built off like crazy, unsustainable 3rd and long play, right? And that, generally speaking, is not a sustainable thing year to year to year for quarterbacks. And then eventually when that went away, admittedly coinciding with knee injuries.
Andy had that injury, yeah.
But like when that went away, Carson Wentz was no longer that player, right? And it's like, just, be careful talking up too much quarterbacks where when you start articulating why they're good, it's built off stuff that we know tends not to be sticky year to year. So I think that's something to be careful about with Bo Nix. It's something to be careful about with Caleb Williams, which, again, you can offset that, right? If they take a step back in that area, but they take a step forward in the easier stuff, theoretically they end up in the same or better place, and it's fine. But the point is, it's risky if they take a step back in the unsustainable stuff and they don't take the step forward elsewhere. Well, then they just got worse.
Over under 9.5 for the Broncos. Where are you going with this?
Over.
Over, of course. The Broncos, same. All right, Kansas City Chiefs up next, coming off of a 6-win season. Very disappointing. It was disappointing even when Patrick Mahomes was the quarterback, but in the game in which they were eliminated from the playoffs, he also tore his ACL. That was in December. He is already cleared to play, so he's been playing in training camp. We'll talk more about the injury and what that might mean. But the Chiefs coming into this year, mostly rolling it back on the offensive side of the ball. The big move is Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP, comes in at running back. And then they have a completely overhauled defense. The majority of their draft, every high draft pick went to the defensive side of the ball. Completely new secondary in Kansas City. So it's, I don't want to use the word reset year, but they're absolutely reloading, rebuilding that defense this year and trying to run it back with an offense that has underwhelmed these last couple of years, especially relative to early Mahomes era.
Yeah. Strange year for the Chiefs in that it's the first year with Mahomes in situ. You would say that they are not clearly kind of ready to rock by the next season. Like maybe they are, but previously, even when they've relatively disappointed, like gotten shellacked in a Super Bowl or whatever, there's been a clear path for them in the offseason. Like, okay, we're going to overhaul the offensive line, and then we're good to go to contend again next year. This offseason, I don't think there was as clear a pathway. Like, here's the thing wrong with your team. Go fix it. And even if there was...
Yeah, it was the defense.
No, I don't think that was true going into the offseason. It became true once they traded away Trent McDuffie and, let other players walk. But my point is, I don't think they necessarily had a very clear target going into the offseason, and then they opened up additional targets by trading away one of their best players in Trent McDuffie. And so then you go, well, okay, from that point on, you draft Mansour Delane, that's great. They've made some other moves. But it's like overall, is this team any better than it was when they came out of last season? I'm not 100% sure it is.
Yeah, so I know your point is they usually have like fix this one thing and you're right back.
Right, it's like here's the thing that cost you the season. Right. And by the way, what cost you the season was still like at the playoff stage, as opposed to you won 6 games last year. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, so they were 6-8 with Mahomes under center. Obviously, once they rested the rest of their starters, they were eliminated from the playoffs. They had a third-string quarterback. They could barely do anything and lost the last 3 games. But it wasn't good even when Mahomes was out there. Some of the one-score losses, one-score games started to go the other way. Let's start with Mahomes and the injury. So he's been cleared to practice, and he's full go. I think he's always been one of the world's great healers, as we know. Quick recovery time and everything. There is a difference between fully cleared and 100%. Right. So there's but you say right as if that's obvious. When once he's fully cleared, people are like, oh, he's great, perfect. It's going to be perfect.
I think anyone that's ever been injured should feel that's obvious.
Yeah.
Like you can be medically good to go, but still not trust whatever got hurt.
So I would expect him to be out there in week 1, but the big question is going to be, okay, what is he? What does he have? Remember, early last season, you had Xavier Worthy hurt almost immediately. You had Rashee Rice out of the lineup, and Mahomes felt like, oh man, I got to run a lot. And he was running like crazy, scrambling like crazy. It's always been a big part of his game, not just scrambling, but pocket mobility and buying time. Does that take 4 or 5 weeks? Does that take half a season to get that? Or is he fine? World's great healer, right? Is he perfectly fine in week 1? So I think that's a huge part of it, because even when all of these players were healthy offensively, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Tyquan Thornton, it wasn't like Mahomes was just, boom, open receivers, moving the ball. Like this offense really struggled last year and at points the previous 2 seasons. Have they done enough? We already see Mahomes working more under center a few days into camp. Is that signifying the change to, hey, we are going to run the ball a little bit more. We are going to use Kenneth Walker a bit more. That has never been Andy Reid's style. And I'm not saying they're going to become this like Baltimore Ravens, hey, Mahomes only going to throw the ball 20 times a game type of offense. People were begging Andy to run the ball when he was in Philadelphia years ago. So he's never been a run-first type of coach, but I'm curious to know how much this offense relies on the run game a bit more. And the last thing I'll add before I let you respond, one of the worst in the league last year, run game-wise, at explosive plays. They were very good at, Kareem Hunt on 3rd and 1 and short yardage, but they were not good at just staying on schedule or just creating anything from a run game perspective especially with a decent offensive line, especially in the interior. I wonder how much they're going to lean into it. And if they really said, hey, we run block pretty well, Ken Walker's going to turn those 2 and 3 yard gains into 5, 10, and he'll break one here and there. And that will put the whole offense back on track, and we have all the pieces necessary to be much better on that side.
That's the thing I think that's really fascinating. Generally, we've been in this world of running back value and how much do they move the needle and how much can they affect an offense. It's been a sort of movable feast over the last decade or so, and I think we've come around a bit more to the idea that they have more power than, at least at some stages, they were being talked about, more influence. I still would not think that a guy like Ken Walker would be individually capable of fixing what ailed the Chiefs' offense last season. However, the Chiefs clearly thought that was the case because they were trying to trade for Breece Hall, during the season, and balked at the asking price, right? Like they've been, add that to the Kenneth Walker free agent deal, which is significant, right? Those two things sort of suggest that, look, for the last year or so, for the last 9 months, the Chiefs have thought the thing that we need is a high-end running back, right? Pacheco doesn't have what he used to have anymore. He's lost the juice. Like, we just don't have that guy. The thing that's going to fix this, it's not a new wide receiver. It's not a new whatever. We need a running back that can really hold up his end of the bargain. So I wouldn't have thought that was necessarily what was wrong with the Chiefs' offense, but evidently they think it is. And if they're right, well, then that changes everything, right? If Kenneth Walker is actually what is going to allow this team to lean on the run game, to completely change the picture in terms of coverage on the back end, in terms of how defenses defend them, well, then maybe that changes everything we think about the receiving core, Rashee Rice, the passing game, Mahomes, all this stuff, right? I'm skeptical. Like I don't feel like it is, but I'm not willing to write it off as an idea just because they've been so consistently chasing that for so long now.
So to be clear with everybody, they've essentially made two moves on the offense. They let Jawan Taylor go from right tackle, but they'd already paid Jalen Moore $15 million a year to be their potential starter, swing tackle. He steps in at right tackle, and then Walker takes over at running back.
So theoretically, the offensive line is basically the same. Yeah. If anything, I think probably upgraded slightly at right tackle, but let's call it a wash.
Yep.
The receiving core is basically the same.
They're rolling it back, including the newly married Travis Kelce coming back. Like, they're rolling it back. But the other change on the offense that I think they were banking on was Matt Nagy out, and then Eric Bieniemy coming back as offensive coordinator. Now, early in camp here, we've had the unfortunate incident. Eric Bieniemy's son shot his mother, Eric's wife. Yeah. So he's away from the team as of record time, obviously dealing with that situation. But that was a big part, I think, of this as well, where I think Andy Reid and Brett Veach looked at this and they said, you know what, it's not a personnel problem.
Right.
It's if the run game just gives us, 5 yards instead of 3, and we tidy things up a little. It's not a personnel problem. We trust Worthy in year 3 and Rashee Rice heading into his contract year and the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's also so the Bieniemy thing is interesting. Not the shooting. The fact that Bieniemy's. He is often talked about as, he's a guy who has wild on-off splits as well, right? Remember, for years, his whole coaching story is kind of fascinating because for years he became this almost like political punching bag of why is Eric Bieniemy not getting a head coaching job, right? For years this went on. And then it was like he left Kansas City basically to sort of prove that, no, I'm a really good coach. It's not just me standing next to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, which is the reason the offense is good. He sort of left to prove that he deserved a head coaching gig in his own right, and then everything from that moment fell apart, and he didn't prove it, and he had to go sort of rebuild his career, came back, reunited with Ben Johnson in Chicago, and suddenly you've got this details-oriented coach in Eric Bieniemy pairs with detail-oriented coach in Ben Johnson, and suddenly at least, A, that offense is really good, as you would expect, but B, like DeAndre Swift is fixed, right? Like DeAndre Swift went from a talented, physical guy who's really difficult to tackle to, well, suddenly his vision is on point, and he's hitting the right hole, and he's making the right play at the right time. Is that Ben Johnson? Is that Eric Bieniemy? Is it only both of them when they're together? Who knows? But they bring back Bieniemy, who theoretically is this sort of details-oriented coach, to this offense that's been in this kind of funk for a while now. That's going to be fascinating to see how it works out. And then the other element of this is we haven't really seen this receiving core together the way it was supposed to be for years now. Like, everyone keeps getting hurt, right? Hollywood Brown is no longer even there, and we basically never saw him as the serious part of the offense that he was supposed to be, because almost from day one he got injured. Xavier Worthy had to be in a different role than they wanted him to begin with. Rashee Rice got his knee blown apart early in the season, and now he's rehabbing it again from jail now that he's out. But, like, as much as they haven't changed it that much, it's, I think, in large part because it hasn't been together the way it was supposed to be yet. So maybe they're banking on that. Like, if these guys just play together.
Yeah, because Worthy was battling injury for much of the season. And
yeah, like week one, Travis Kelce ran into him, blew his shoulder apart.
No, they were all together for a big chunk of the season. It didn't get that much better. But
not like healthy, not 100% healthy.
Not 100%
now, maybe
healthy.
You'd say, look, nobody's ever. But, like, start of the season, Xavier Worthy gets hurt. Rashee Rice has missed the majority of a season with a knee injury. Like I said, Hollywood Brown was hurt basically from the day they signed him, right? He's not there anymore, but, like, this receiving core as a unit has not been what they expected it to be, basically at any point.
I would also say, Tyquan Thornton was so good early on last year, and it felt like they just didn't feed Tyquan Thornton enough. Like, he was unbelievable. He was never good with New England.
Yeah.
He was open behind the defense 2-3 times per game. That's extremely valuable, as I've laid out to you before, when you're open for potential 50 and 60 yarders consistently. So I think they might have the pieces there. Rice as the possession guy. We expected Worthy to be the stretch the field guy. Thornton did that extremely well last year. And then you look for late round pick Cyrus Allen, who's got some shiftiness to him, and Jalen Royals, a guy that we liked last year. I think the theme for Kansas City, though, reset, rebuild. There's a lot of reliance on last year's draft class, the 2025 draft class. We'll talk about some of those guys on the defensive side. But it's trying to find this next group, right? Kelsey's rolling it back. I think he looked a little bit better last year than he did in previous seasons, but he's still not. He's a guy that can get open, but doesn't really do much after the catch at this point. They missed Josh Simmons for various points last year, both personal and injury, starting left tackle. I think he's still a slight question mark, but overall very good in pass pro. So I think they've got the pieces to be better offensively. It'll come down to, I think, Mahomes' health, how much he's going to play how much he's forced to play within structure early in the season, and then because he's special when he can obviously create and move and do what he needs to do. So want to see what that balance is for Mahomes early in the season. Defensively, it's all new. Chris Jones returns. George Karlaftis returns. Few players are back, but completely overhauled secondary. They're going to miss both starting corners. Trent McDuffie's been traded. They go Mansour Delane with their first pick, who I do love Mansour Delane. I think he'll be outstanding. He was the best corner in the nation by far last year at LSU. And then 2025 draft pick Noel Williams expected to be the guy next to him. They did bring back L'Jarius Sneed, which, you kind of expected to kick the tires and see. He's one of those guys that's only been good in Kansas City under Spags and really struggled when he signed a big contract and got hurt a lot in Tennessee. But the whole draft was geared toward the defensive side of the ball for the Chiefs. It's a full rebuild here. Peter Woods was their second first-rounder, defensive tackle from Clemson. R. Mason Thomas, likely starter on the edge next to Karlaftis. Maybe Ashton Gelati plays another 25 draft pick. It's a lot of first and second year players that they're relying on that side of the ball.
Yeah, which again, it's like, is this group better than it was a year ago? It's not immediately clear. I like a lot of the young players they brought in. Peter Woods, R. Mason Thomas, Mansour Delane. I like the draft they had. Like, I really liked it. But I liked it a year ago, and guys like Jalen Royals basically never saw the field, right? It's like just liking the players is not enough for a draft class to have that kind of impact. This could be a good group, but a lot of anytime you're talking about relying on multiple rookies to have significant roles in a unit, it's not a good thing, right? And maybe they will, and if they do, great. Then you've had one of those Lions drafts where, you nailed it and you have a sort of cheat code for a couple of years until you need to pay them all. But the hit rate of that is not high. Like generally speaking, when you're relying on multiple rookies to have significant roles, one or more of them won't, right? Or won't play well in that role. And if they don't, you're in trouble. Like, again, I love Mansour Delane. I think he's one of the best corner prospects to come along in a few years. But he needs to be basically as good as Trent McDuffie. And that's probably not going to happen because Trent McDuffie is the top 5 corner in the NFL. Mansour Delane picking up that slack right off the bat is a really tough ask. So he's got to do that. Peter Woods needs to make an impact inside. R. Mason Thomas, as you said, he's being talked about as a starter already, in large part because, what's the alternative, right? It's Ashton Gelati.
Leo Chanel at linebacker. So you have Drew Tranquill and Nick Bolton back, but Chanel was a very productive player for them for a few years. So yeah, there's a lot of turnover here. Then you have the Chris Jones factor. I mean, he still had so many plays last year. If you're watching the Chiefs and you just pause it like a second into the play and he's by the guard, I mean, he still had 1 to 2 of those a game, which is a monster number, by the way, for defensive tackles. If you can have 1 or 2 plays that you just completely destroy right away. But it wasn't as consistent as previous years for Chris Jones either, right? So he took a bit of a step back. So it is more fragile, or I would say at least unknown, on the defensive side of the ball. And it's a bit of a reset or a rebuild now.
And Jones is now reaching that age, 32 years old. Yeah. It's like, I mean, look, he could go on another 6 years and be Cameron Hayward, but it's that age where you start to say any slight sign of decline, you're like, is this it? Is this the slow start of the downslope of his career? Like, will he ever be the best defensive tackle in the NFL, again? So I'm not saying he needs a bounce back year, like if you just play, but Chris Jones might not be Chris Jones anymore. He might be 80% of Chris Jones from this point on.
If I was to summarize this year, I would say there's a lot of pressure on the coaches this year, on Andy Reid getting the offense back on track, on Spags developing the young players. It's worth noting they brought in Justin Fields as the backup quarterback, and I don't know how much this will show up because the 90% has to do well for red zone stuff, but think about the creativity that they have in the red zone. They have Gardner Minshew taking direct snaps. They'll have Justin Fields taking direct snaps, like as a way to
think of the QB sneak upgrade.
That's what I'm saying. You could get the QB sneak going in there. Don't have to deal with Mahomes and the injury. So I think there's just a lot more pressure on the coaches to get the most out of these players. The last time the Chiefs truly had a reset year, what felt like a rebuild, was 2022, but they hit on that draft class. That was McDuffie and Karlaftis, and they rebuilt the defense, and they didn't have Tyreek Hill. Mahomes played maybe the best season of his entire career, and they go and win a Super Bowl. So I'm still at the point where I'm not writing off the Chiefs or what Mahomes is capable of, but this does look like it's their worst roster of the Mahomes era. It does, but because it's unproven, doesn't mean it will be. 22 looked like it was the worst roster too until it proved itself pretty quickly. But it's on paper the worst roster that they've had, and you have Mahomes coming off the ACL.
That's the thing. It's on paper, I think, the worst roster they've had, and last year reset the worst case scenario for Kansas City. Like, up until last year, I would have said that Andy Reid plus Patrick Mahomes equals 9-10 wins in a playoff appearance, right? Like, I would have said the floor for this team, just with those two there, is legitimate contending team that's probably going to make the playoffs, and then maybe they get bounced because the rest of the roster isn't any good. And then last year showed that's not true at all. Actually, this Andy Reid plus Patrick Mahomes can equal 6 wins. Okay, the last few weren't really, Mahomes was already injured, but like it wasn't going well even when Mahomes was there, right? So actually, the worst case scenario, if this roster is the worst that they've had, is the team just isn't a contender anymore. And I would have said that was pretty much impossible up until that point. And that's before you factor in, well, now he's also coming off an ACL.
Right.
So I think that's where the Chiefs are, is that this is, on paper, the worst roster they've had basically since Mahomes got there. As you said, doesn't mean it'll play that way. Like, if all of those rookies do play really well on defense, well, it's a different prospect, right? If Mansour Delane is like a top 5 corner right out of the box, if R. Mason Thomas is, a high-end pass rusher immediately, if Peter Woods is a dominant force on the defensive line, if Chris Jones backs back, like blah, 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 there's a variety of ways all these guys could be better than they look on paper. But, and then the other thing is, if the Chiefs are right about Kenneth Walker, right? If he does have a transformative effect on the entire offense, because the thing that's been missing is a high-end running back, again, everything's different. I'm just saying right now, if you're a betting man, if you're playing the odds, if you're like, what's the most likely thing for the most likely way for all of these elements to unfold? I think the most likely thing is for this not to work in their favor necessarily.
So the over-under's 10.5. It's an interesting schedule. They're going to start on Monday Night Football. They're throwing Mahomes right in there against Denver.
Yeah.
It's still 2 home games to start. Broncos and Colts. They get Dolphins and Raiders back-to-back, so you get like a bit of an easy finish to September. But there's a couple stretches. They still have to go to Seattle, and there's a stretch starting at Thanksgiving at Buffalo, at the Rams, at the Bengals, who we think are going to be pretty good again, home against New England, home against San Francisco, then the Chargers. That's the stretch I think determines the Chiefs' season. They've got some tough games, some gimmies in there, but that stretch from Thanksgiving through the New Year that I think determines if the Chiefs are back or if they're potentially missing the playoffs again in a tough schedule. Over under of 10.5.
So that's interesting relative to the Denver one, right? Like they're a game better than Denver. Denver's roster, top to bottom, you would say is significantly better than Kansas City's at this point. But that's the difference between Bo Nix and Patrick Mahomes, right? But again, it's like how much credit in the bank is there for a guy who was only on his way to winning 6, 7, 8 games last season and wasn't coming off an ACL injury? Now he is. I'm going to go under in this. I'm kind of down on the Chiefs this year.
I've never been a Chiefs doubter whatsoever. I've always been scared to doubt Mahomes and Andy Reid.
Yeah,
I'll say under.
I was right up until last year.
until I read that stretch. And it coincides with, hey, maybe Mahomes is more healthy and that's better. But I'll say under on the 10.5. It's a big number. All right, let's go Las Vegas Raiders. We're cruising today.
Easy.
Las Vegas Raiders coming up next. We got Fernando Mendoza, drafted number 1 overall, but Kirk Cousins.
I was going to say.
The announced starter.
You put
right
some
now.
Respect on the starter's name.
Clint Kubiak comes in fresh off winning the Super Bowl as offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. Raiders had that number 1 overall pick to take Mendoza. Second year for John Spytek as general manager. Look, it's a really tough division. We know that the Chiefs have this 10.5 over-under. The Chargers were a playoff team. The Broncos won the division. The Raiders are the 4th best team in the division, but are they at least on the upswing here in year 2 under John Spytek?
Yeah, absolutely are. I mean, I think the Raiders are moving in the right direction. I just think they were coming from a very long way away. And the offense, I think, could be kind of interesting. I think the defense still has a way to go.
Going into last year, if we were doing our Fixing Every Team in 5-minute series in, say, early March, and I was saying, Raiders, think 2026, right? Think a year ahead. And like 3 days later, they traded for Geno Smith.
Yeah.
But it was they had a chance to reset, and I don't know if teams do that enough. I mean, the Dolphins are doing it. The Dolphins looked around, and they were like, well, we're not going to compete with the Patriots and Bills right now. Let's look to 27 and beyond. Let's start rebuilding this thing. It took the Raiders a year because it felt like they were trying to do competitive rebuild, right? They hired Pete Carroll as the head coach. They bring in Geno Smith. And going into last year, we were like, you talk about the floor for the Chiefs. We thought, well, Pete Carroll's got a pretty high floor, right? He's at least a good motivator, and he'll reset the culture with the Raiders. I think you and I were both on the same page with what we expected from the Raiders last year, and we were both pretty wrong because they were awful across the board, even when they were somewhat healthy. But the offensive line got depleted. The offense could do nothing. Geno Smith, was the worst we've seen him in a decade. So nothing was good. I think this year they embraced the full rebuild. It's going to it's younger. They tried to trade Max Crosby for 2 first-rounders that ended up getting reneged. So Crosby's still back. So I don't know if they're necessarily even better yet, but I think they're at least on the upswing. They did throw a lot at free agency at a bunch of players, but I think they at least embraced, hey, we got to look to the future here.
Yeah, they did. I mean, yeah, last season the Raiders were one of the teams that I was sort of completely wrong on going into the season. Just them, the Jets, I think were another one in the same direction, actually. Like I expected the combination of Pete Carroll plus Geno Smith, even the sort of slightly declined version of Geno Smith, to be, look, you're going to be the worst quarterback or at least the 3rd best quarterback in the division at best, right? You're going to be worse than Mahomes. You're going to be worse than Herbert. But, maybe you can contend and make them competitive and difficult to beat in every single game. And the whole thing was just a disaster, right? Obviously, Pete Carroll's fired after a year, and then Geno Smith has moved on from after a year as well. And Geno was the worst version of him we've seen since the Jets time, the original, like, complete mess. It was awful. And it wasn't even the frequency of the bad plays. It was the type and magnitude of them. It's like, dude, what are you doing? These are rookie ridiculous plays that you should know better than at this point. And he wasn't. It was a complete mess. So going from that to anything else, it should be a significant upgrade. Now, the kind of caveats there in terms of it's not all Geno. This is a team whose number one receiver is Brock Bowers, the tight end, who got hurt pretty early on, missed some time, and then even when he was coming back, he wasn't the same player that he was before he got injured. The difference between being medically cleared and 100%. Brock Bowers now going into this year theoretically should be back to 100%. So that changes how you view the receiving core, right? On paper, it doesn't look great. Dante Thornton, Trey Tucker, Jack Bech, Jalen Naylor. You're not excited about that. But if Brock Bowers is the number one and then those guys are number 2 through 5, you feel better about it, right? So I think the group could still be. And then the other thing is the offensive line, the run blocking, Ashton Genty. So I think this offense could get pretty good pretty quickly. It's the defense that's still a year away.
Let's talk about that offense again, because I have some questions about the receivers, but like you said, Bowers is a number one. Like, he is a move around, play the slot, play outside, play in line, wing, whatever it needs to be.
It reminds me of the 49ers receiving core for a hot minute when George Kittle was their number one guy, right? And they hadn't yet sort of assembled the receiving core that they had, where it's like, it's fine. Like, it looks terrible if you just list the wide receivers, but if you factor in that the number one target and the best player there is the tight end, it looks different.
They got a career year out of Trey Tucker last year. They spent a little bit of money for Jalen Naylor, who's been like a good 3. You know, he's been a really good, opportunistic number 3, you know, with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison over there and in Minnesota. There's expectations for Jack Bech in year 2. I think they need at least 2 of those guys to step up. Dante Thornton had some flashes early last year as a 4th-round rookie, but you just saw his inexperience in it, you know, coming out of the Tennessee system. But he's got the size and speed. You just need 2 of those guys to step up, whether it is Kirk Cousins or whenever Fernando Mendoza ends up taking over. The O-line should be much better, though. Colton Miller missed last year, most of last season, at left tackle. They paid for Tyler Linderbaum to come in, set a record at center. They bring it DJ Glaze back at right tackle, and you get Jackson Powers-Johnson locked in at right guard. I'd say 3 out of 5 you probably feel really good about with Colton Miller, Tyler Linderbaum, and what we believe JPJ can be. I think Glaze is good enough at right tackle, and it's like, the only big question mark might be left guard for them. That's a huge upgrade from what was actually happening on the field for the Raiders last year, both from remember, O-line, it's run blocking and pass blocking. They were bad at both, but the run blocking especially was out of this world. Genty was getting hit in the backfield almost every play.
One of the worst offensive line performances I've seen in terms of a season, particularly in the run game. He was just getting buried. Like, he was being met at the handoff by defensive players almost all the time. It doesn't look fixed, the offensive line, but it definitely should be better than it was a year ago. Linderbaum is a huge signing. I mean, I think they obviously, I don't want to say they overpaid for it. They paid dearly to get Linderbaum, but I think it makes sense. Number one, they had the money to spend, and number two, it's the player they needed, right? They needed A, that upgrade at that position, but B, also a guy that could take some of the heavy lifting from a line call blocking point of view, the mental aspect away from Mendoza early in his career. I think those are all good things. So that could be huge. Unlocking Genty would be a huge thing for this offense. You know, maybe I'm a little lower on him now than I was this time a year ago, having seen him in action for a year. Having said that, he was still fine. Like, he was not the problem last year. The blocking was.
When he got a little bit of room, you started to see that
exactly.
Ability. But but I think he needs more room.
Maybe.
Then I think that's what you're trying to convey. Like, I think he needs a little bit more room than even I had anticipated.
Not even
as
that.
Far as like short area quicks.
What I'm trying to convey might not even make coherent sense.
Perfect.
It's
clip that, please.
It's not even that. So, you know, you're basically articulating a stylistic running back like Saquon Barkley, right?
Yeah.
Who, when the blocking is great, Saquon Barkley can rush for 2,000 yards and be an MVP candidate. When it's not great, there are other running backs that are better than Saquon Barkley in the same situation. I'm not sure Genti is actually that, which is sort of what you're suggesting. My thing is more, though I'm acknowledging it's basically not his fault at all, I'm a little bit less enthused by what I think he is, just in overall talent terms, based off a season of getting his ass kicked, than I was a year ago, right?
So you're calling him Trent Richardson?
No, but maybe like,
I know.
I'm not even sure. Like, maybe this is just an unfair transference of criticism from what belongs on the offensive line, the blocking, and Genti's just like catching a stray in my mind. But maybe he is actually not quite the transcendent running back that I thought he was going into the year.
Either way, I think I'm with you. If I maybe down a touch on him, but I still think he'll be fine. He'll be more than fine. Linderbaum's going to help a lot. Linderbaum's one of the better. He's one of the better run blocking centers in the NFL, and especially when you put him in a Kubiak zone scheme and the Kubiak history here. I mean, I think this run game gets back. The Shanahan-Kubiak history in the run game, I think it gets back on track.
That's the broader point, right? Unlocking Genti is huge for this offense. Like, Bowers being your number one, I think, is fine. The receiving core might be fine if Bowers is your number one. And then if you can unlock Genti as well, and suddenly you've got a run game to work off. Like, I think this offense could be good. I'm still a little bit concerned by the line. Miller's really good. Linderbaum's really good. I like the positioning of those guys, left tackle, center. Like, those are the two positions that I would want to fill first if I was getting high-end players. JPJ, we'll see. I like him as a player, but it's a little bit concerning that multiple coaching staff seem to have not loved him. They have options at tackle. I would be letting all of those options compete for the right tackle spot, as opposed to you're the backup left tackle. No, nobody's a backup left tackle. We'll deal with that if and when
Colton Miller. Five.
Right. If and when Colton Miller goes down, we'll figure out who the backup left tackle is. For now, you're all potential starting right tackles until somebody nails down that spot.
So offense, let's talk Mendoza really quickly here. He was the number one overall pick. We didn't talk as much about him as we talked about a lot of other players during the draft because we knew he'd be the number one overall pick. It's already been declared that Kirk Cousins will start the season. When do we see Fernando Mendoza?
My story has been the same all along. It's going to be week 4.
Week 4.
You get a month.
Which is Kansas City.
This is how this works. You get a month. This is how everybody starts, right? We're going to slow play it. We want to develop him. We want to bring him along slowly. He might not play all year, right? And then by week 4, the starter's been so embarrassing, you have to pull him and put in the rookie. That's how it's going to happen.
I will just say for Mendoza, I will stick to my story. You start the quarterback when he's ready. You start the rookie quarterback whenever he's ready. It could be training camp. It could be week 1. It could be week 10. It could be year 2. Whenever he is ready, define what ready is, whatever type of mastery you're looking for as far as the offense goes, whenever he's ready, you put him out there. Defensively, man, if Max Crosby wasn't on this team, it would look that much worse.
Yeah.
So Max Crosby, still a star. He's still there for the Raiders. I don't know if they end up talking trade with other teams heading into the season, if we see like a Micah Parsons late training camp type of move, or if you start the season and then, hey, there's injuries or the Lions want to bring him in, whatever it may be. But if the Raiders, look, they declared that they were embracing the full rebuild, especially on that side of the ball, by getting 2 first-rounders for Max Crosby before the failed physical designation from the Ravens. So he's back with the Raiders, still a star, run game, pass rusher. He could do it all. Beside him, they brought in guys like Kwity Paye, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Teron Johnson, bunch of veteran types, some good, some okay. So they tried to at least upgrade the defense, but going back to the Gruden era, I've been saying, man, they're missing, outside of Max Crosby, they're missing stars on that side of the ball.
Yeah, not just stars. They're missing a lot of talent, period.
Just high-end players, right? Kwity Paye is like a pretty good number 3 edge. He's probably got to start. Tyree Wilson's out. He's been traded. It's not a great group.
It's really not. And I think they're probably now going to have Max Crosby for the duration. I don't think they're going to kind of revisit the trade thing. I think that was a one-time opportunity that failed, and now they're going to roll with him. And to be honest, you might as well. Like, the offense could be good. You can't just have nobody on defense. A star and a bunch of other guys is better than nobody. So I'm okay with that. Yeah, I mean, again, it's another defense that's reliant on a lot of young players. I mean, the cornerback room, right? Like Darian Porter was a wildly kind of inexperienced, but physically talented young player. I mean, he's potentially a starter now that they need to be good. That's risky. You've got the Jermod McCoy gamble, right? First round, top half of the first round talent who went the first pick of the fourth round because of concerns of his knee injury. And we don't even know yet what that's going to mean. Will he need surgery? Will this just be a degenerative thing that just caps how long his career is? Like, we've no idea what the story is going to be with him going forward. Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be a bad unit, let's be honest.
That's what I think. I think Patrick Graham did a really good job without a lot of talent there the last few years. The people that I would keep an eye on, Jermod McCoy, if he ever plays.
Yeah.
Obviously. The fourth rounder who was a top 15 caliber player at corner has the degenerative knee. He'll be a story for Raiders fans to keep an eye on. I think Darian Porter, the cornerback out of Iowa State, who was one of the more fascinating prospects in last year's draft cycle because of his inexperience, but older age, but he's long and fast, right? And so Darian Porter is developmental corner. Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker coming in. You know, we've never really liked Quay Walker, but Nakobe Dean, when he's out there, has that transformative ability, I think, for a defense as far as leadership and just being a productive player. So I mean, those are the types of guys.
Another injury marred player though.
Yes, but those are the types of players you're saying, hey, if it's going to get better in 27. Did we find someone in Dean? Did we find someone in Porter? Can we navigate this Jermod McCoy situation? Teron Johnson, I think, is a good, another, had some injury issues, but he's been a really productive nickel for the Bills. So I look at it almost like I'm describing last year, like the culture reset. I think they delayed it a year last year with the Pete Carroll move, but you might be able to get a few pieces on the defensive side of the ball. And then a year from now, you're saying, okay, the big question is going to be a couple more, go all in on defense, and we need like another playmaker or two for Mendoza.
Yeah, and because there's so little proven talent there, the opportunities are there for a lot of young players to step up and, win jobs or become something. Like we've been talking about McCoy, Darian Porter, but Trayden Stukes could win a job immediately based off, the relative strengths and weaknesses of that secondary.
So another good athlete that they brought to the table that has safety, corner, hybrid skills. So there's some intriguing players on that side of the ball, especially athletically.
I love, just from a story and comedy perspective, reuniting Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker, like two linebackers who played next to each other at Georgia. And it's such a fascinating case study of what the NFL values. You've got Nakobe Dean, who from start to finish was quite obviously the better football player at all levels, at all areas, at all times, right? But Quay Walker is a much better athlete and bigger, right? And so Quay Walker is the guy that A, was drafted ahead of him, and B, gets more money in free agency. Now, okay, you could say because of his injury history, that's fair. But, like, Nakobe Dean is still a better football player than Quay Walker. Again, it's not even close. And yet, it's just fascinating to me. Like, it's such a great case. That's the perfect case study of what the NFL values. They want super athletes, and then they'll try and teach them how to be football players. And if you have a good football, it's like the Bears dealt with this with T.J. Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds for a while. Like, you've got the super freak athlete, and you've got the guy who's just a really good football player. And they will always be valued more in the NFL.
Over under 5.5 here for the Raiders in what I think could be the best division in football. I mentioned the NFC East yesterday. I think it's in competition because of the top three teams.
I was going to say, your definition of the best division just discounts a quarter of it at all times.
Yeah. That's correct. It won't be the best division, the NFC West, where I'll discount a quarter of it.
Right. Again. Man, I'm going under.
Yeah, I'm going to go under as well.
This team's not good on
Unless Mendoza steps in and is special.
After a month.
Or if Clint Kubiak's special. Who knows?
What if Clint unlocks Kirk Cousins again? What if Kirk just needed 2 years to knock the rust off his Achilles and now he's ready to go?
It's a possibility. It's a possibility.
How old is he? He's only like 37.
Let's wrap it up in the West, AFC West, with the Los Angeles Chargers.
He's about to be 38, August.
MVP caliber quarterback Justin Herbert.
Hell yeah.
Back. The O-line was awful last year.
It was.
But they should be better. We'll talk about the O-line. Chargers lose in the wild card round last year. Another disappointing Justin Herbert playoff game. But I'll be hyping up the Chargers it's year 15.
Forever.
Year 15 of summer hype in my life for the Los Angeles Chargers. The big question, though, Jesse Minter gets the head coaching job with the Ravens, their defensive coordinator. I want to talk about the defense when we get there. Let's start offense, but when you talk about the defense, I think he's done a really good job. Minter did a really good job with pretty good personnel, okay personnel. And they developed some players. Can they keep that going? Because they've had one of the better pass defenses in the league the last couple of years. But the big question is going to be offensively, Justin Herbert. You have Mike McDaniel coming in as offensive coordinator. And, of course, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater back at tackle and Tyler Biadasz in at center. Is that enough to get the O-line back on track?
Yeah, that's the big question. The line last year was a total and complete disaster by the time they got halfway through the season. And from that point on, didn't matter what anybody else was going to do. The big question in particular is what those two tackles are going to be like coming back from injury. Joe Alt, I think is more expected to be 100% ready to go, good to go. I mean, he himself is sort of saying, yeah, I'm good. We don't know if it's going to be, day one of training camp, full go, everything, or if they're going to slow play him through training camp. But most people expect Joe Alt to be A, ready to go week one, and B, ready to go at his full peak. Rashawn Slater, I think, is more of a TBD based off the injury he's coming back from, patella injury, a bigger deal, effectively, than what Alt is recovering from. They need him back as well. If they get those two, Tyler Biadasz is solid at center. The guards, I think, are both more of a question mark. But offsetting that is the idea that Mike McDaniel's coming in, and he's one of those guys that can kind of weave magic and offset personnel concerns along the offensive line, right? This has been a trend of his for years. And really the Mike McDaniel thing is huge across the board because you've got that potential impact. Like, what can his scheme do to the offensive line? What can his scheme do for a guy like Omarion Hampton, who I thought looked really good as a rookie, albeit behind a terrible offensive line? What can Mike McDaniel's scheme now do that it couldn't do when Tua was the quarterback because of his noodle arm? Now you got Justin Herbert, who can stand at the 10-yard line and hit any part of the field, right? That's got to unlock some stuff that Mike McDaniel hasn't had on the table up until now, right? That guy's had the opportunity to go and sit in a bunker for a while and go, my quarterback has freakish arm strength, athleticism, and ability. What can I run that I've not even thought about running for the last few years? Because what's the point, right? I'm not saying that will automatically produce magic, but there's certainly a possibility that Mike McDaniel, unlocked with a quarterback like Herbert's skill set, produces something pretty special.
I'm torn on that analysis, the Tua versus Herbert thing, because Tua he is unique for that system, right? I mean, he ran it. He would get rid of the ball in 2.2, 2.3 seconds, and Tua put up some big-time numbers that also coincided with having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So even in the Mike McDaniel analysis, the offense was cooking when he had Tyreek Hill, who is a deep ball cheat code, both for Patrick Mahomes and for Tua. So in every time Tua got hurt, even quarterbacks who should have, like Teddy Bridgewater, wasn't running the offense the same way. So Tua did have some uniqueness to how quickly he got rid of the ball and the anticipation that he threw with, which I wouldn't necessarily say like you want Herbert doing. Like you want Herbert zipping it outside the numbers. And I agree with you, like the downfield stuff, there might be some more opportunities there. So I think that's going to be real interesting. And I agree with the part of McDaniel has done a really good job with underwhelming personnel on the offensive line. Even last year, the offensive line, like they were able to run it with Devin Achane, and the run game should be better with McDaniel. I think he's always been good in that area.
Yeah, and it's never as simple as an A/B analysis. Like, at Mike McDaniel's offense was absolutely cooking with Tua, but as things went on, it did seem like teams figured out a way of defending that offense generally, and understanding how to limit what they wanted to do. Well, now all of a sudden, and potentially
they were definitely capped, right? They went up against good defenses.
Well, not just capped, but also potentially Mike McDaniel's ability to evolve that offense was capped by what Tua can and can't do, right? So with a different quarterback, maybe Mike McDaniel will go, okay, this is how they're defending me now. Here's version 2.0 of this offense. I'm going to attack somewhere else. With Tua, you might not have been able to attack somewhere else because of his limitations. With Herbert there, now you can, right? Like there's potentially other areas of this offense that can be expanded or increased that weren't really on the table with Tua. So again, you're never getting a clean A/B analysis on anything. But my point is, I wouldn't rule out the idea that Mike McDaniel has never had a quarterback as physically gifted as Justin Herbert. What can he do with that?
We look at the receiving core. Ladd McConkey had a great rookie season in 24, 25, regressed a little bit. I do think he's got great speed, quicks, route running. You can move him inside and outside. I'm expecting a bounce back big year for Ladd McConkey. The rest of the receiving core is really interesting because I think they've got intriguing players like Trey Harris in year 2, Keandre Lambert-Smith in year 2, year 4 of Quentin Johnston, who coming off of his best season still has some size and speed. I don't know who emerges as the 2. I'm intrigued by Trey Harris there, though. And then the guy that I can't wait to see with Mike McDaniel, the guy that he was high-fiving everybody in the draft room for, Brendan Thompson, the fastest receiver in the draft last year from Mississippi State. That dude was cooking SEC corners last year with his speed and quicks. Just get ready for some Brendan Thompson behind the defense. I also love what they've done at tight end. And they did it before the draft when everyone else, or they just did it in a different way. They got Charlie Kohler in free agency. I think he's one of the better run blocking tight ends in the NFL, and he could do more as a receiver. Arondé Gadsden is a hybrid, big tight end slot or big slot tight end hybrid type. David Njoku comes in. I think they've got a lot of flexibility when it comes to the playmakers there.
Don't forget the other guy that he was coveting was Keaton Mitchell. So you've got multiple speedsters in this offense. It's going to be a fascinating team to watch because Mike McDaniel, I think, is widely regarded as one of the best offensive minds in the game. In particular, the run game stuff has been very good. And you get the question answered now, how much can the passing game expand, evolve, develop with a different style, a different physical ability quarterback?
So offense, I think they'll be good. It can't be overstated enough. It wasn't that the personnel was bad on the offensive line. It's that they lost both starting tackles, and then the interior also, personnel-wise, wasn't good. And they just had different groups out there, and repeating again, it was bad run blocking and pass blocking last year. They couldn't run. They were bottom 3 run blocking unit, bottom 3 pass blocking unit. Anytime they ran up against a good team, Herbert was under fierce pressure. There were some ugly games in there, but there were also games where Herbert elevated them, and overtime win against Philadelphia, and holding his own against a Houston defense. It was challenging running anything offensively last year for the Chargers.
Yeah, they had by far the most number of combinations on the offensive line of any team in the NFL. And we talked before, there's power to continuity on the offensive line. Well, there's equal power to constantly shuffling the offensive line as well. And then if you look at the most snaps played by any player at each of the 5 offensive line positions, the starting 5 effectively, the average starting 5 that the Chargers deployed is one of the worst groups of names you'll ever see for an offensive line. It's like they trotted out a third-string preseason offensive line for most of the season, effectively. So they basically had no shot to execute against any kind of decent team. Everyone knows that I gave Justin Herbert an MVP vote last season. You can't see, the ironic thing about the Herbert thing, people are out here being like, Sam's a Herbert apologist. Going into the season, I would have been in the same bucket as everybody else last year, saying this is a guy who's got immense physical talent, but has he ever really put it together? Will he ever really put it together? I think he did put it together last season, and you saw it early in the year, and then the offensive line completely fell apart, and so any statistical case or evidence for that disappeared. And people will look at the Philadelphia game last season, right? His stats in that game, I think, were horrendous. And people use that as look, he was terrible in that game. If you watch that game and came away with the conclusion that game made, that game worsened your opinion of Justin Herbert, I don't know what you're watching, because he's the only reason that game wasn't a 40-point blowout against the Chargers. It was Justin Herbert somehow overcoming miracles despite being under pressure 80% of the time or whatever. It was nutty. So the point is simply, I think he did put it together last year. You then connect him with what we're saying is widely regarded as one of the best offensive minds in the game in Mike McDaniel. and you've upgraded the offensive line. My point is simply, let's sit back and see what he can do with that.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Because as I've said, I think Jesse Minter earned himself a head coaching job because of what he's done on the defensive side of the ball. He's got that whole McDonald, Fangio, we're going to play too high, we're going to play lighter boxes, that whole tree. I thought the Chargers did a fantastic job of dealing with the fact that they didn't really have that great run plugger at defensive tackle. I think Jamari Caldwell helped a little bit last year. They have a pretty good group of pass rushers, and they developed younger corners, guys like Cam Hart and Tareeb Still. Never really had this, on paper, great group of corners, but every year you're like, hey, who are the best pass defenses the last 2 seasons? It's been the Chargers. Now, Chris O'Leary is the new defensive coordinator. He comes over. He was DC at Western. He's 1-year defensive coordinator, Western Michigan last year. He was safeties coach with the Chargers before. Can he keep it going? Because this felt like one of those units when we do this exercise in the offseason. How does the depth chart look? Nobody's saying, oh, the Chargers, they look great. They're fine. But I think they definitely played above their personnel these last couple of years. And one of my big questions is, can they keep that up? Because it looks similar on paper.
Yeah. Really Spartan, really kind of sparse resume for Chris O'Leary. Like a very sort of inexperienced coach. Like he's been a safeties coach at a couple of different spots. As you said, went to the Chargers for that 1 year as their safeties coach, then had a year in college, and now is back given the DC gig. Like that's a pretty rapid ascent from nothing effectively to running an NFL defense, taking over from a guy who was doing it at a really high level. It's a big ask for him, particularly because Jesse Minter seems to be one of those defensive coaches that can raise the level of a group talent-wise and get more than the sum of their parts. So there's a lot on his shoulders right now to just keep it trucking, right? Just keep the train on the tracks and not have a dramatic drop-off.
I like the group of pass rushers. They bring back Khalil Mack once again for a 1-year, $18 million contract. Same thing he did last year. I think they're continuing to he's still a productive player, not what he was 5 or 6 years ago, but a productive player that's worth $18 million at this point. Khalil Mack, Tui Peloto, Akeem Mesidor is their first-round pick, the old first-round edge rusher out of Miami. But that's a nice trio, plus Bud Dupree for cleanup sacks. So I do like that. I mean, I think that's a good group. Jamari Caldwell, as I mentioned, played pretty well at nose. Tier Tart, they're okay up front. I think it's a good group. Diane Henley at linebacker. The front seven looks solid. And then you have Derwin, who will line up at slot and just kind of be your do-it-all player. So it's not, again, that they're devoid of talent, but I do think they've, the finds that they've had in the secondary, will they still be able to keep that going and just play well as a unit from a pass coverage perspective?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Mesidor can do because his tape, honestly, was pretty much as good as anybody in that draft class in terms of the impact that he can make. So if he's able to hit the ground running and just become a devastating player at the NFL level, paired with Tui Peloto, with Khalil Mack, and Jamari Caldwell, there's Tier Tart still a good player. That could be a really good defensive line. On paper, your questions are more in the back seven, but with this acknowledgement that schematically they've been overcoming that and they've been playing better than that level. Can they keep that going with O'Leary instead of Jesse Minter?
All right, man. Chargers over/under is 9.5.
Well, we have to go over, don't we?
We got to go over.
It's off-season, preseason, prediction mode. Therefore, the Chargers are over.
It is. AFC West in the books. We'll hit the NFC in a minute. But first, check the mic. Brought to you by FanDuel. For baseball fans, this is for baseball fans, and you, Sam, of course. Think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel's giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Joining the action's easy. You just make your free pick on who's hitting a home run in their game, and if you're right, you'll get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. You got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And don't forget, you can make a free pick every day during the MLB season. There's some strategy to this, right? Like teams playing in Colorado in the thin air, teams playing against the bad pitching staff, players that are hot. You've seen Kyle Schwarber and what he's done this year. Keep mentioning my Reds. Yeah, they're hitting home runs even if they're not winning a ton of games. So you can be strategic in who you pick here. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So are you ready to play your game today? You can join all the action at FanDuel.com/33rd. That's FanDuel.com/33rd to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. Like if you knew I was pitching, you would just pick anybody.
Yeah.
Opposite, you know.
Definitely.
Just be strategic with that. Must be 21 plus in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Connecticut, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. In Maryland, visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050. In Massachusetts, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In New York, call 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. I'm back on the mound tonight.
I was going to say, did you just bail from your team for a month?
I did.
Did they look kindly on that, or
they got to deal with it? I got family comes first. But I'll be back tonight on 30 days rest, so the arm should be good.
You would hope.
Ready to injure myself again. All right, NFC West. We're starting with the Arizona Cardinals before we get into the juggernauts. Cardinals had the number 3 overall pick. They went with Jeremiah Love. They've recently extended Jacoby Brissett. They were signed into the 1-year, $15 million deal. He'll be back as the starter. Mike LaFleur coming in as the head coach. Get some change here in Arizona this offseason.
Indeed, a lot of change. Also, significant draft for them. Yeah, they're an interesting team. I mean, I think talent-wise, they're still obviously the floor of this division. They're the team with the hardest schedule in the NFL, right, by a fair distance, according to the sort of Vegas predicted win totals of opponents. So it's probably going to be a rough season for the Cardinals.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by this offense, man.
Yeah.
So Brissett, if you gave me a list of quarterbacks who were going to average 42 attempts per game and set the record for completions and attempts in a game, if you gave me a list of current NFL quarterbacks, I'd probably pick Brissett 60th. That's where he'd land on the list. He was always like a low volume, take care of the ball type of player. And the pass game looked good for a chunk of time. They didn't win a lot of games, but for a chunk of time, when he became the starter over Kyler Murray, the offense looked pretty good.
What a fascinating career arc for Jacoby Brissett. He came in and he was the archetypal game manager quarterback. You're barely going to throw the ball, just don't screw it up when you do, right? And then his biggest weakness was sort of taking bad sacks in the red zone when he was doing that, right? And then somewhere along the line, they just went, you know what? All that stuff we've been talking about before, forget all that. What if you just go out there and pretend you're Jameis? Just close your eyes and heave the ball, right? And that guy, Ryan Paganetti, who's been on social media, tweeting out various analytics things and blah, blah, he had a thing called the YOLO. Was it the YOLO Index?
YOLO Index.
And it's all the people you think it should be, right? It's it's a lot of YOLO superstars on this YOLO Index of quarterbacks since 2000. It's basically just a early down interception rate amongst quarterbacks, right? Which does a pretty good job, actually, of identifying true YOLO quarterbacks. Because in this list, you've got Mark Sanchez, John Kitna, Jay Fiedler, Derek Anderson, Rex Grossman, Josh Freeman, Trent Green randomly in there. Then you get Jameis. Now, this is colored by the fact that since 2000, generally speaking, interception rates have been going down, right? So for a guy like Jameis, a recent quarterback, to be that high is itself an achievement.
Good
then Jameis bolted right next to Ryan Fitzpatrick in the true YOLO zone. Brian Greasy, Vinny Testaverde, Brett Favre, the gunslinger. It's all these quarterbacks, right? Jacoby just launched himself into this group from nowhere.
Out of last year.
You were like game manager plus, and then suddenly he vaulted himself right into the Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick world of blind, close your eyes, throw up a prayer, and hope good things happen.
Now, don't disparage Jacoby Brissett.
I'm not. I'm just saying he's now in that world.
He is, just perspective here, he is tied for first in NFL history, lowest interception rate, Jacoby Brissett. Because I think if on third down, he's not throwing any interceptions. He's taking a sack instead.
Yes.
Interception rates in NFL history. Let's do it. Aaron Rodgers and Jacoby Brissett. Then Justin Herbert. Then Tom Brady and Colin Kaepernick. Then Tyrod Taylor, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott. It's all
fascinating list.
Current players. Derek Carr.
Well, that's the thing. It's all current players, right? Which is why
Gardner Minshew's tied for
the top guy in
14th.
the YOLO index is Mark Sanchez, not Jameis.
Sam Bradford tied for 18th. Always believed in him. The first non-era player that you get, like the real leader in NFL history.
Steve Young.
You ready for this? Now we're going off the rails. Neil O'Donnell.
Ah.
Neil O'Donnell, the guy that threw 2 picks in the Super Bowl that Uncle Anthony thought was throwing the game, was on the take. Uncle Anthony he's justified. This is a cold case that we need to unlock here. Neil O'Donnell's the best at avoiding interceptions in NFL history, and he rolls into the Super Bowl and hands a couple to what's-his-face, the safety for the Cowboys. Uncle Anthony justified here. He knew they were on the take. He knew. All right. Back to the Cardinals. The offense is interesting to me.
It is.
Just because you add Jeremiah
Personnel-wise.
Love to the mix, Marvin Harrison Jr., who is good. I think he's good, right? If you just said, hey, he was a third-round pick, what is he doing? Second-round pick, he's good. We'll talk about him in a second. Michael Wilson, who was great when Marvin Harrison was out of the game, and then Trey McBride, who's become maybe the best pass-catching tight end in the entire NFL, him and Bowers battling for that spot. And again, you add Jeremiah Love to this backfield. We added Tyler Algier, and you have James Conner. It's a good group of playmakers. Plus, the O-line is, in average-ish territory.
Yes. From a personnel standpoint, I am very intrigued by the Cardinals' offense. I think it could be something pretty fun. The Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. Dynamic will be pretty fascinating because Michael Wilson himself talked a little bit about his success last year being based a lot on how much X receiver he was playing in that alignment, and it tended to be like his best stuff was playing X. And then when Marvin Harrison comes back, Marvin Harrison is the guy who plays X. And in the sort of rigid system of last year, that meant Michael Wilson just kicks in immediately and is a different role. And so in a new offense, part of the excitement will be, well, what if you mix that up a bit, right? What if actually both guys got to play a little bit of X, right? And both guys got to move around because A, Michael Wilson's really good playing X, and B, Marvin Harrison Jr. right now is probably crying out for some easy layups, right? What if we moved him around and gave him some easier alignments, right? So it could work to both of their benefits to mix that up a little bit more and have Michael Wilson playing some more X receiver. There was a discussion on Twitter a little bit yesterday, today. To me, Marvin Harrison Jr. feels like a guy whose confidence is just in the toilet. Now it has been for a while.
You were reading that off of the interview?
No, I'm reading that off the last year of his existence. Like he plays like a guy who's short of confidence. He doesn't speak like a guy who's full of confidence. Everything about him right now screams, I have zero confidence in anything. It's understandable to me because this is probably the first time in the guy's football playing life that things have not been automatically going his way by being bigger, stronger, faster, and better than everybody that's been around him, right? This is probably the first real adversity he's ever faced as a football player. And I imagine that's difficult for guys like that, right? The first time, it's like an MMA fighter, right? The first time that guy loses, particularly if it's like a stoppage, right? The first time you either get knocked out or choked out, that's got to be devastating to your entire mental existence.
For all of us, yeah.
Because you went your entire life thinking you were basically invincible. I'm the best in the world. I'll never lose. And then a guy either knocks you cold or chokes you out. And the only thing that stopped you, losing your life at that point is the official decorum of sport or the ref taking the guy off you. That's got to be absolutely devastating psychologically. And I imagine Marvin Harrison, the first sort of time where it occurred to him, you know what, I'm not the best guy out here anymore, was probably pretty psychologically devastating. I don't know if the Cardinals have a sports psychologist on staff, but I would be bolting that guy to a sports psychologist and moving him around, trying to get the best version of him. But something's off with him.
Yeah,
above and beyond whatever is physical, is he actually an elite, high-end, number one physical receiver as well? Above and beyond that, I think his confidence is shot.
He had some awful drops last year, bad routes. Also had some big plays. He's had some big plays over the last couple of years. I think he still runs routes pretty well.
But you remember when he caught the touchdown and broke down almost crying in the end zone? It's that's
the same game where he had a drop.
Yeah.
Had a bad route that led to an interception and then helped the Cardinals in their comeback attempts.
But that kind of thing feels like a guy who's low on confidence.
No, I get it. I didn't know if you were reading into his interview because I didn't know enough of.
I don't think a guy who's high on confidence has that kind of reaction to scoring a touchdown.
Right. So I still think there's more in there. It's just a matter of can they get it. Well, I think where he's lacking, and we talked about this when we reviewed the former first-round picks, he doesn't have the dynamism along the route, right? He's not particularly quick off the line of scrimmage or dynamic out of breaks. I think he's a good route runner, sinks his hips, gets in and out, but I don't think there's that special to it. But he's shown a little bit of all of it, though, that you need. It's a matter of putting it all together.
I do think, like, if I'm right, and low confidence is a big part of his problems at the moment, that's a good thing in that it means if he ever rediscovers his confidence, is a much better football player in there. Plus, again, moving both those receivers around might help them both out. However, let me counter that briefly by reading you this, or at least a point of this tweet from Adam Levitan. Is that his name? How you say it? From Establish the Run. He was quote tweeting a tweet from the Coach Speak Index and said, "This reminds me to update the sticky note on my monitor, the whereabouts of dolty coaches, one of whom is Nathaniel Hackett, the Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator now." So it's like all the stuff we talked about, like the potential good things of the personnel. What if it's all undone by the fact that Nathaniel Hackett is the OC?
I think that's Hackett's place to shine, though, because he's he'll have a couple memes and some jokes to kind of lighten the mood. He might not be good at, coaching or play calling or any of that, but
which would be a pretty big part of his job.
But remember he was told Aaron Rodgers jokes and kept it light, or he was the memes. Maybe that helps.
I mean, it can't hurt, but I'm just saying maybe that's offset by the coaching part of his job.
It's dolty coaches.
So his list is Shane Waldron, who's now the Jacksonville assistant head coach and pass game coordinator.
Way too much crap just for being in building. It's not right.
Nathaniel Hackett.
Shane Waldron's in the building, and that's why Brian Thomas Jr. got worse.
Nathaniel Hackett, Cardinals OC. Kevin Patullo, Miami passing game coordinator. Matt Nagy, New York Giants offensive coordinator. We talked about him yesterday. Arthur Smith, Ohio State offensive coordinator. I think I like that system. Maybe we can quibble about who the coaches are, but I like the idea of just keeping a sticky note handy. The guy, you might like this personnel group, but remember who's coaching them.
All right, stay on track here. Stay on track. My point in all of this, the offensive line looks, fine. They might have an exciting group of on the offensive side of the ball. There's some what ifs in there, especially Marvin Harrison. And then Jeremiah Love, they took him at number 3 overall.
That was
big
the
playability.
Reason. That was the reason, by the way, that this kind of came up, is because Nathaniel Hackett's basically talking about how great James Conner's going to be as the number 1 running back in this backfield. And you're like, dude, you just drafted Jeremiah Love 3 overall. Like, either you're out of your mind or shut up. There's no way Jeremiah Love isn't the alpha running back in this room, regardless of what you want to do.
All right, defensively, we've talked about this a bunch, but if we were going to characterize the Cardinals the last couple of years, they were feisty and played well in underdog situations, and we were but they just don't have any talent. And then last year they got the talent, and the whole thing fell apart, especially defensively, which makes me think they've got some players on that side of the ball. Can they at least be better? The over-under is 3.5, and the big part of that, the over-under is 3.5 because of the schedule. They're one of the 3 teams.
And the quarterback situation.
You're ranking Jacoby Brissett 30th to 32nd among starting quarterbacks in any objective list, right? But the schedule as well. They've got one of the 3 difficult schedules that matters. They're playing all these NFC West teams that all went to the playoffs last year and one that won a Super Bowl, and the superpower that is the Rams. But defensively, Walter Nolan, you get a whole year out of him. He looked really good as a rookie at defensive tackle. Xavier Collins still a solid player. Josh Sweat's a good pass rusher. Budda Baker, a good safety. Will Johnson at corner. Garrett Williams at corner. They have some talent. They just went from overachieving for 2 years under Jonathan Gannon to completely underachieving last year, and dealing with injuries, of course.
Yeah, they did. I mean, there is some talent on that side of the ball. I think they're another one of those defenses, though, where it's there's a lot of weaknesses, top to bottom, depth chart-wise, personnel-wise, depth-wise. And again, it felt like a team, the irony of it is that coaching-wise, they felt like a team that was overachieving for a number of years, and then that stopped happening. So as much as shifting coaches to something else should upgrade, it felt like the previous guy for most of the time was doing a better job than you would expect, and so simply getting back to that isn't easy, is what I'm saying. The Cardinals to me, I think, are very intriguing on the offensive side of the ball, less so on the defensive side.
All right, man, we've talked.
By the way, just credit for Jacoby. recognizing his value, digging his heels in, and he got himself $17 million guaranteed dollars.
That's great.
I mean, this is his one shot to get paid,
his chance.
right? Like you got 1 year as a starting quarterback in the NFL where he's unquestionably the guy for the moment, and he went, no, I'm digging my heels in until I get some money out of this, and he got $17 million from it. Good for him.
All right, man. Over under 3.5 here.
Man, that's a low number to be going under, but I might still do it.
I'm going to go over.
Under.
Going over on everybody. So, over on the Cardinals.
It is, the hardest schedule.
Scares me, yeah.
The hardest schedule in the NFL, in part because the other 3 teams in this division are all Super Bowl contenders.
All right. We got the three playoff teams to get to in the NFC West. But first, excited about our friends over at SeatGeek and excited to go see the Pirates tomorrow night. Yeah, the Pirates, because Paul Skeens is pitching. SeatGeek is my spot to get my Reds tickets. Pirates, Reds, Paul Skeens pitching, but also NFL preseason. I get to check out Bengals tickets for the preseason and for the regular season because they won't let us into the game as media. We're no media. But I think they have the Steelers coming in their primetime game, Sunday Night Football. SeatGeek's the place. So shout out to one of today's sponsors. It's SeatGeek. Over 35 million downloads. SeatGeek's the #1 rated ticketing app. Easy to use. There's over 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. MLB's in full swing. Like I said, that's where I get my Reds tickets. College football starting back up. I like to see all the teams in the area here: Ohio State, Notre Dame, Tennessee. They're all within like a 4-hour radius. So if you get the right game, get the right price over at SeatGeek. College football, great place to get your tickets there. And then, of course, the NFL and NBA. Love using SeatGeek for all of my tickets. They've got your back because every ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. So you know if you're getting a good deal, you just look for green dots. That's it. Green means good, red means bad. Very familiar system for you and I, Sam. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And, of course, I have a code for everybody. Your code is Mike10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Mike10, MIC10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek.
Are the Titans in their new stadium this year? Is that opening? No. The Bills are, right? Are the Titans still a year away?
Titans at least a year away. Okay. They've got the Super Bowl, not next year. They've got it in a few years. But I think next year that might be the first year. Another one good to go to. All right, 3 more teams. Starting with the Los Angeles Rams are up next.
Oh, boy.
The offseason winners, the super of super teams. Rams coming off of an NFC Championship loss to their division rival Seattle Seahawks. But this offseason revamped their secondary and, of course, made the big move, trading Jared Verse and a whole bunch of draft picks for Myles Garrett. And the rumors, as of record time, still strong, that first ballot Hall of Famer Aaron Donald is thinking about coming out of retirement to rejoin the Rams.
Well, I mean, he's definitively thinking about it. The rumors are that it's going to happen, barring effectively some kind of major setback in his, he's gaming it out right now, right? He's going through the motions. He's seeing what he feels like. And the idea is if all's good, he's going to go. So basically barring Donald going through a bit of a process and then going, nah, you know what? I just don't feel it. It just feels bad. I'm hurt, whatever. Then he'll be retiring and rejoining this Rams team. And it's such a great story. Like a guy taking that amount of time out of the game, but also coming from the level he was coming at, like the best defensive player in this century, the best defensive player maybe of all time. A guy like that unretiring after a few years out of the game to see what he has left. Like, he's 2 years younger than Cameron Hayward, who's arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL right now, right? Donald could be anything from a guy like a completely diminished version of himself who barely makes an impact to actually he unretires and is the best defensive tackle in the NFL. And he's alongside Myles Garrett. Like, watching that is going to be amazing if that actually comes to pass.
The Rams look absolutely loaded on both sides of the ball.
And by the way, they're the favorite to trade for Vita Vea if that goes down as well. Imagine if all that happens. We get Myles Garrett and Vita Vea and Aaron Donald.
I don't think they're doing both.
And then J.J. Watt could unretire. We just unlock the whole Avengers system.
Yeah, I'd really do that. The 2012 Eagles, 2011 Eagles super team. Last year at this time, we were a little worried about Matthew Stafford and his back. I was more worried than you. You seemed to think it was going to be fine. You were right.
It's in the airstream.
Stafford was not practicing. It kept getting pushed out. He ends up having probably the best season of his career, wins MVP. Looked great out there for the most part. You have Puka Nacua, still uncoverable. I think got even better last season. Devontae Adams clearly lost a step at this point in his career, but was a massive red zone weapon and still a good number 2. I mean, for most of these teams, we're going like position by position and kind of evaluating it. With the Rams, it's more like, okay, what could go wrong? Because they're good everywhere. What could go wrong is obviously injuries, but wide receiver 2 with Adams, if he loses another step, right? There was talks about them, if they hadn't drafted Ty Simpson with their first-round pick, going with Mekhi Lemon or maybe Kenyon Sadiq, like another pass catcher to help that group. They go with future-proofing of the roster with Ty Simpson. So maybe that's the one thing that could derail this thing. I don't know what else, though. It looks – and then special teams. That was their big downfall last year was special teams. They had one of the worst special teams units in the NFL. Their division rival Seahawks had one of the best. That was a big part of Seattle's win on Thursday Night Football in Seattle. But, yeah, the Rams – they can
remember they fired the coach going into the playoffs. They've already made the schematic change there.
They had the blocked game-winning field goal against the Eagles. It literally cost them multiple games because offense, if you just look at offense and defense, the Rams were probably the best all-around team in the NFL if you just took special teams out of it last year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a part of the game. It's at least 11% of the game.
It is.
It's not a third. It's not a third of the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, people get sick of all the love being thrown in the direction of the Rams, but it's hard to look at that roster and not say that is definitively the best roster in the NFL, being coached by one of the top 5 coaches in the NFL with a quarterback who's coming off an MVP season. It's hard to look at that and not think that they're the best team in the NFL right now. That doesn't mean they will be the best team in the NFL for the entire season or that they'll win the Super Bowl, but I mean, it is what it is. This is the best team in the league going into the year.
The other thing that could derail it, I mean, Stafford's been a little up and down the last couple of years.
Right.
What a fascinating career with the Rams, though. 2021, they sign him, he wins the Super Bowl. His best season to that point, I would say. 22, injuries, inconsistency, the roster kind of falls apart. 23, they redo the whole roster. It's all young players, and Stafford helps elevate them to a playoff berth. And they found Puka Nacua and the whole thing, but man, he did a really nice job. Playing, I think, above even the talent level that they had. 24, it became more of a defensive first team halfway through the season, and Stafford was they had games where they were scoring 12 and 14 points per game, and then last year he has his best season. So he's been a little up and down during his Rams time. So maybe that's one of the things that could derail it. But I'm only viewing it from that point because everything looks strong on paper. Kyron Williams and Blake Corum at running back. Run game strong. All 5 starting offensive linemen return. Alaric Jackson had some off-field questions that might need to be sorted out.
May still be, yeah.
They're going to run their 13 personnel because now they've got 5 tight ends with Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, Terrence Ferguson, Max Clare, and Davis Allen. They don't just have 4 tight ends. They drafted Max Clare, who was one of my favorite tight ends in the draft. So they've got scheme versatility. The whole league's trying to copy their 13 personnel trend. And then defensively, Myles Garrett coming in, who's an absolute force multiplier. I think the Rams have had to rely on some, 5-man pressures and everything these last couple of years. Myles Garrett gives them the ability to say, hey, we're rushing 4. Because between him, Braden Fisk can get after the quarterback. Kobe Turner can get after the quarterback. Byron Young coming off of a big season. He can get after the QB. I think Garrett gives them the ability to win with 4 up front more than they have in the past. And then you have Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson coming in as your starting corners, steal them from the Chiefs. They could play more man coverage than they've played. So I think they've got more defensive flexibility, can play more man and rush 4 more often, whereas they've been relying more on 5-man rush and a little bit more zone these last couple of years. So I think the moves didn't just make them better on paper, depth chart, personnel-wise. Both sides of the ball have incredible flexibility schematically as well.
Yeah, I think really the most obvious negative that people probably aren't factoring in is the fact that Matthew Stafford will almost certainly be worse this year than he was last year, right? And that's not because he's getting older. It's not because of his back. It's just because he had an MVP season last season. The chances of him backing that up with another one are pretty small based off history, but also his history. I mean, he tends to bounce between good and not so good years. But also, most players don't go back-to-back MVP, right? So you look any number you want, pretty much, between last year and the year before that, it's worse. So I'm not saying he's going to be bad this year, but if he's just worse than he was last year, that's a step in the wrong direction at the most important position in the game. That is a significant negative factor that people probably aren't factoring in when they're just saying, well, they added Myles Garrett to last year's team, Super Bowl, right? So it's worth, pointing out that Stafford's probably not going to play like MVP this year.
The move from Jared Verse to Myles Garrett, it's worth at least rehashing this. I think Jared Verse is an outstanding player. Myles Garrett is one of one and has been for a few years now as a pass rusher, not just because he had the sack record last year. I always mention it as the stress that he puts on offensive tackles being out of this world. He's still a very good run defender. Nobody talks about Myles Garrett's run defense. He is a good run defender.
Do you see that video of him going through a little drill the other day?
No.
He looks
freakier than ever, though, these last couple of years.
So it's one of those things where there's like a big pad, like a high jump pad to his left, right? And he sort of sheds the first guy with a pad, and then there's another guy with a rugby pad coming at him, and he tackles that guy into the big high jump pad, right? You remember that sports science segment where they got Ndamukong Suh to take your man, what was his name, John something?
Yeah.
And just launch him as far as he could launch him? It looked like that, right? Like Myles Garrett sheds the first guy, and then this guy with a pad gets like launched into this high jump pad by Myles Garrett. It barely, he looked like he was barely putting any effort into it. I think it's easy just from looking at him, watching him play, but I think you forget sometimes just how freaky that guy is.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. I mean, I think the Rams they've done everything properly as far as building what you could do in the offseason, building the on paper monster. Their big question right before free agency was their secondary. They were getting torched at times last year.
Yep.
The defense, I would say, was good. The second half of 24, the first 2/3 of the season, half of the season of last year, and then there were some games that got picked apart offensively, defensively. And they said, all right, we'll solve that. Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, we're bringing back our safeties because they're still very good. So they ticked that box and then upgraded even further with Myles Garrett. I've got some questions about where they go in the future, but for this year, they're loaded up. Not just this year and next year as well. They're loaded up and making at least a 2-year pretty strong push the way this roster is constructed. I will mention this, we are in talks at least to try to get GM Les Snead on the show.
Way to jinx that.
I know. We're in talks. We're hoping to do that. So hopefully got some great questions to ask Les and get into how they got to this point from a roster building perspective. So we're hoping to get that done as well. But I know it's just off-season paper champions, but it's the Rams. They've built a juggernaut here, and assuming they stay healthy, I think they're right there in the mix at the end of the season.
I mean, we've said this, again, the fact that they are the best roster and the best team heading into the season doesn't mean that they'll win the Super Bowl or that they'll even be a great football team this year. But it means 31 other teams would probably trade places with them, right?
Yeah.
It's the best position to be in right now. Again, doesn't mean it will sustain or that it will result in a championship, but it's better than everybody else is working with heading into the year, and that's significant.
And the over-under is 11.5 for the Rams. So Vegas acknowledging, hey, we've got high expectation for Los Angeles this year. Where are you going to go?
I'm going to go over. I mean, 11.5. Again, 11.5 is the high number that you see for best teams in the NFL, and we expect this to be the best team in the NFL. Therefore, even in a strong division, I'm going over.
I'll assume health and over for the Rams, and probably be my Super Bowl pick. Earmuffs, Seahawks fans. We'll get to you guys in a minute. San Francisco 49ers are up next. They're coming off a season where I think they did a really nice job offensively, getting things on track, dealing with a whole lot of defensive injuries, especially to their stars, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, just a depleted defensive line, and they still were battling for the number 1 seed as recently as week 18, right into the final week of the season against Seattle. win a playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Really impressive season last year for the Niners. Their over-unders 9.5. As of record time, we know head coach Kyle Shanahan. The report just came out this week about his car accident, and he's been out of practice at this point. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully he'll be okay in his recovery. I think that's certainly a factor. He's one of the best coaches in the NFL. He's the play caller. He does everything. He's the glue for that offense. But Niners heading into the season, what are we looking for here?
Yeah, what a weird story, the Shanahan thing. The fact that it was somehow that went like in this world of everything is out 5 minutes after it happens. There was like 10, 11 days or whatever when nobody knew that Kyle Shanahan had been in a serious accident.
Well, people knew, they just didn't.
Well, some people knew. Most didn't, though. I mean, obviously, like somebody like Chris Sims, who's a friend of his, and they like holiday together and stuff. Like, Sims is a journalist, I guess, is a reporter in the media, but isn't like he's also a really good friend with Kyle Shanahan dating back to years ago. So, like people like that knew. But it's kind of wild that this thing was kept quiet for so long in today's day and age. And it sounds like it was pretty serious. Like a bad concussion that Shanahan himself has said has sort of made it difficult to focus and watch tape and stuff now. A bad enough injury that they were plastic surgery or whatever to put him back together. Pretty major stuff.
So I think, that's a factor in the season here because not only is he the head coach, but yes, he's the architect of this offense. And we always reference Shanahan as the guy that has continually gotten the most out of quarterbacks, whether, going back to Matt Schaub and RG3, Matt Ryan, Jimmy G, and now Brock Purdy. Purdy's been outstanding, I think, overall, not only taking what the scheme gives him, but now, taking it to a new level. And I think the question now for Purdy was the one we asked a couple of years ago, like what happens when he doesn't have prime Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and prime George Kittle and all of these playmakers that he's had. They've tried to replenish in certain ways here, but they've been chipped away at depth-wise on both sides of the roster. But I think Purdy has been able to step up until they run into Mike McDonald. And Purdy's splits against Mike McDonald versus the rest of the league are drastic. That's one of the big questions for the Niners is how do they solve that defense?
Yeah, which is not just a Niners
it's not just
specific
Purdy's
problem.
issue,
It's everybody's dealing with that at the moment. It's interesting. This team so much of them is going to be about how the players that are coming back from injury return. Like Kittle in particular on the offensive side. He's an interesting data point because he's relatively young compared to these guys we've seen recently coming back from an Achilles injury. There's this strange dynamic where the timetable for Achilles injuries has been dramatically shortened relative. Like it used to be a full year. It used to be way worse than an ACL. And now it's like you can come back in a few months and be good to go. I mean, Daniel Jones already cleared to be full participant, ready to go, full go in training camp, right? So you've got that timetable. But as you said, there's a difference between being cleared and being 100%. And for Kittle, it's not a quarterback, right? Kittle's got to he's got to put hundreds of pounds through that leg trying to drive defensive ends off the line of scrimmage as a run blocker, right? He's putting forces through that Achilles that quarterbacks are not. And how, what does he look like? How effective can he be? Is it the real George Kittle, or are we basically sacrificing this year as, this is like a full year version of what happened with Brock Bowers last year, where he was back on the field, but not really Brock Bowers, because they kind of need him. I mean, I know they got Mike Evans in. You've got the rookie Deshaun Stribling that everyone's hyping up in training camp right now. Ricky Pearsall, Christian Kirk, they've got some players, but that offense needs Kittle at his peak right now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting offense because you're relying on Kittle's return. You're relying on Mike Evans, in year 13 of his career. And, Evans, I think, is still very good, but, you saw more, injury last year. Maybe, I don't know if he's lost half a step. He can still get open, but, you're relying on a big-bodied outside receiver like Mike Evans. You're relying on Ricky Pearsall to take the next step in his development. So we suggested this would happen a couple years ago once Brock Purdy got paid. More pressure is going to be on him when it comes to the pass game. I thought, the connection to Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield has been outstanding. McCaffrey ran the ball at extremely high volume last year, but he was like 40th in yards per carry last year. The run game was just okay. It was just a high volume. It was good for fantasy. Wasn't necessarily good for efficiency. So there's some questions about this offense. But I think they were good overall last year, like I said, until they ran into some tougher defenses.
Yeah, I mean,
Seattle.
I had no concerns really at any point about the offense last year. They've still got more than enough talent to make it work. The problems last year, obviously, were the defense. And we said this time a year ago, heading into the season, Nick Bosa's great, Fred Warner's great. They're a little, I mean, not a little, they're quite a lot weak behind those guys. The depth behind them isn't great, right? And we were thinking about it in terms of, do they have enough help around them? We had never even thought, what happens if both those guys aren't even on the team anymore, right? What if they both go down hurt? Well, then there's just nobody. Then this defense is just completely bereft of talent. There's nobody there to make plays. And that was the case. Like, they just got absolutely destroyed once those guys went down.
And that's why Robert Saleh got a head coaching job, because they had no talent last year. Saleh's a four-man rush guy.
Yeah.
He does not want to blitz whatsoever. And he's got maybe the worst four-man rush in the NFL. Last year, once Nick Bosa got hurt, and first-round pick Michael Williams, who's still not a great pass rusher yet, gets hurt early in the season. So let's talk defense, because I think the defensive line is still the big story. Bosa's return, Michael Williams' return. They traded for Keon White last year. They've traded for Osa Odighizuwa right before the draft or during the draft. What's that?
Great move.
Yeah, love that move. You have year 2 of Alfred Collins and C.J. West. The depth certainly looks a lot better. They just got third-round pick Romello Height just got injured. I saw the report that he got injured and carted off. I don't know the extent of it at this point. But Grayson Halton drafted as an undersized pass rusher from Oklahoma. They've thrown a lot of resources at this the last 2 off seasons. So it looks better on paper as far as the depth goes. Will they be better rushing the passer? And by the way, Raheem Morris comes in as defensive coordinator. He's more likely to send 5 and use the linebackers. So I think the pass rush should be better than it's been these last couple of years.
Yeah, and also, remember the impact that Bosa and Warner can make. I mean, we weren't talking about this defense as a complete liability this time a year ago with those 2 guys in the lineup. We were saying
they need help.
Yeah, they've got some depth questions behind them, and maybe if they want to win a Super Bowl, they need a bit more help around those guys. They need the young players to step up and take some attention away from Nick Bosa, et cetera, et cetera. But like, those 2 guys transform a defense from being a problem to being fine, and then we'll see how good it can be. And that, I think, will still be the case. Like, Warner, remember, was cleared, or was back practicing rather, in the playoffs. Like, he was pretty close. So you would assume this point in July, months later, that he's good to go 100% again. Nick Bosa, that's tricky coming back from that injury at that position, given the stresses, again, you're putting through your body at that spot. But let's assume he'll be back. It should still be good. Now you're back in the same situation of how many of the young guys can develop and step up and get better.
Michael Williams is a big one. They took him top half of the first round last year. He was on the younger side, played under 1,000 snaps at Georgia in college, and it felt like, hey, he'll be more of an impact run defender with his length, and played through injury his final season at Georgia, so you didn't really get to see him, getting off the ball, but he was like in the mix to be a number 1 overall pick, just never fully developed as a pass rusher. I still think there are questions for Michael Williams as a pass rusher, but he's a pretty good run defender, might do his best work rushing on the interior. I think that the Niners have a chance to, between Alfred Collins, Michael Williams, and Odighizuwa, maybe do a better job attacking guards and centers this year than they do the edge opposite Bosa. So it's an intriguing group up front, assuming people come back and healthy. Fred Warner's 1 of 1 when it comes to linebackers. Yeah. Remember, and high level, just to back up quickly on the Niners, 3 years ago when we were listing the best players in the NFL, the Niners had like 5 or 6 best players at their position. Left tackle Trent Williams, tight end George Kittle, Fred Warner at linebacker, Nick Bosa was in the mix on the edge, McCaffrey at running back. Those guys are older, or not the best at their position anymore, and this is where the Niners are now versus when they were in the Super Bowl a few years ago. It's just not as strong of a roster. And last year I thought last year's draft class was as important as any class for instant impact for the Niners. And I think that's where I'm looking at this roster and saying, have they added enough impact players from the draft these last 3 years? Because we're still listing stars. We're still talking about if Warner's healthy and if Nick Bosa's healthy and if George Kittle comes back. I think they've done a little bit better job, but I still have a lot of concerns about the depth on this roster, certainly compared to where it was during their Super Bowl year a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my concerns are more, it's less that the 49ers roster has gotten worse, though I think it probably has. It's more at the same time, Seattle became a Super Bowl winning team, and the Rams now look like the best roster in the NFL by a reasonable margin heading into the season. Like the two teams in your division that you're competing with took huge steps forward in the time where you got slightly worse.
Yeah, it's definitely a factor. There's questions in the secondary as well, I would say. You know, a lot of that's dependent on they were unable to really create a pass rush last year, but Renardo Green's been a little up and down his couple of years. Diamador Lenore, again, he's played decent football for them. It's a pretty good group on the back end. Upton Stout did some nice things as a rookie, but they've been up and down, I think, as a group on the back end. Niners heading into this year. You're right. I mean, being in this division, they look like the third best team.
Yeah.
In the division because,
and to be fair, they did.
If you were doing power rankings, I think a lot of people have the Rams and Seahawks 1 and 2, or at least in the top 3 to 5.
And they did last year as well, and they kept winning games in spite of that. And look, part of that's Shanahan, and that's why it's
huge factor.
That's why it's a big deal that he was in this accident and has been away from the team for a bit and has been dealing with severe concussion symptoms. Like Shanahan is one of those superpower cheat code coaches, and if he's diminished in any way this season, that's a problem.
All right, man. Over/under's 9.5. For the Niners. Where are you going to go with this one?
I guess I'm going under just because I think the other teams are so good in the division.
Yeah, I think I have to go under as well. And by the way, I'm a big Brock Purdy believer. I think he's the best quarterback Shanahan's had since Matt Ryan. I mean, it's not like a ton of other competition, but in years of, or maybe just all time, right, for Shanahan. But with all that Shanahan has helped elevate and make people look good statistically, Purdy adds this extra element of scrambling ability and feel, and reads the field extremely well. Overall, makes good decisions. He was chucking it into coverage a couple times early in the year in the middle of the field. But I like Brock Purdy a lot. But yeah, these last couple of years, it's trying to see him elevate a lesser roster, and I think that's the challenge. But man, they did such a good job last year just being in the mix at the end and winning a playoff game. So tough to doubt the Niners, man. I don't know. I'm going to go under here. Under the 9.5. Let's wrap it up with the Seattle Seahawks. The defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Our favorite fan base, our Seahawks fans. Over/under's 10.5 for the defending Super Bowl champs. Sam Darnold's coming off of another outstanding season. Everything that GM John Schneider touched last year turned into gold, from Sam Darnold to Gray Zabel as a first-round draft pick to Nicky Manwari as a trade-up second-round draft pick. Nolan Teasley has been plucked as the general manager for the Minnesota Vikings, leaving Seattle. But John Schneider, setting records, the first executive to win 2 Super Bowls with 2 completely different rosters, doing that over a decade apart. Really impressive multi-year rebuild, really, for Seattle. I thought their depth had taken a hit for a few years, but since the 2023 NFL draft, you'd argue the best drafting team, and it all came to fruition last year in a Super Bowl win.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what 12 months or one kind of run of the Midas touch can have for an executive. I mean, Schneider was kind of being talked about as being on the hot seat for a period, and then he has a 12-month period where everything he does turns to gold. Absolutely nailed it. Not all of it was sort of voluntarily, right? Like Geno Smith kind of wanted out, right? DK Metcalf wanted out. Like there were things that they did that I don't think he necessarily was proactively driving, but just rolled with the punches and made it work. And then he's like unquestionably like executive of the year, Hall of Famer, setting records. It's amazing the way the story can flip. But the job they've done has been spectacular. I mean, they had a Lions type of draft where you just nail everything, and like all the other stuff they nailed. The ancillary stuff, the veteran stuff, the Geno out, Sam Darnold in, the coaching stuff, everything. They nailed all of it.
So heading into this year, most of the offense returns intact. They're out Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP, but you have first-round pick Jadarian Price from Notre Dame. You have Zach Charbonnet coming off of an injury, but Charbonnet was really good down the stretch. I mean, if we remember the flow of Seattle's season last year, the defense under Mike McDonald has been very good in his 2 years there. But like McDonald did in Baltimore, like it started a little slow, and then boom, it kind of like hit this point where it's, hey, this is one of the league's best. The offense last year, it was a Kubiak-esque offense with Clint Kubiak calling the plays, where Sam Darnold would throw the ball 25 times a game, 28 times a game, but for incredible efficiency and high volume rushing attack to nowhere. Like, it was an ineffective running game, but high volume. But the run game came good down the stretch. You got more out of Walker. You got more out of Charbonnet. But Darnold was extremely efficient. JSN was setting, efficiency records where we're comparing him to players from the 40s who were like, the volume of pass yards or receiving yards that were going to JSN, who became, arguably the best receiver in the NFL last year. So it was a fascinating year, but the offense was very good to complement, one of the best defenses in the NFL. That's why they won it all. But most of the offense returns. JSN took such a step forward last year, man. Going from a guy who looked like, hey, he's a good route runner. He gets open, started catching the ball more effectively than he did earlier in his career. But he's just open behind the defense left and right. And then they added Rashid Shaheed, who's always open behind the defense. And Cooper Kupp added a nice possession complement to it. The offense really came together. And then you have 2 straight years, by the way, of Sam Darnold being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And that's a huge story and a reason why, of course, Seattle won it.
Yeah, for different coaches in different cities, different environments. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's time to accept Darnold's just good. There's a lot of talent there. Look, the receiving core, I mean, when they traded away DK Metcalf, it was a projection to say that JSN could step into that number 1 role and what that would look like. And not only did he do that, but he wildly exceeded expectations and just looked like the best receiver in the NFL. And then, as you said, they traded for Rashid Shaheed. Torrey Horton was drafted, is coming back from injury. Maybe there's some redundancy with him and Shaheed, but you could also see that as contingency, as a backup plan if Shaheed goes down. A.J. Barner's a really good tight end. We didn't see that much from Elijah Arroyo year 1, but he's still a talented route runner. And in this world of multiple tight end sets, maybe he has a bigger role going forward. The backfield may be a work in progress or a committee, but they were splitting time with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. Even when they were both healthy, Charbonnet presumably will be slow played to start the season. But once he's back and ready to go, you would imagine some kind of committee with him, Price, maybe George Holani as well. It's a good team.
If I can go back to what we thought last year at this time, because I forgot about the timing of that. You're right. Like, DK Metcalf left. And then it was like, all right, JSN and Cooper Kupp are going to be the 1 and 2. And JSN, remember, he ran in like the 4.5s, didn't he? Officially run in the 4.5s. And Cooper Kupp, 4.6 guy, whatever he is. And you're looking at this team. Rashid Shaheed wasn't there yet. It's like it's slow. It's a slow team on paper. But then before you know it, JSN's playing like Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's just open behind defenders, and you add Shaheed. Like, it never felt slow at all because JSN was so good at getting open on the outside. We were like, hey, Torrey Horton's the only guy that might bring some athleticism to the table, or Elijah Arroyo. So they still have those guys, but you have JSN and Rashid Shaheed, and whether it's speed or not, it's guys who can get open on the outside. The other question we had was on the interior of the offensive line. Mm-hmm. Gray Zabel hits the ground running. They finally drafted the first-round guard, and he plays the whole season. Anthony Bradford's still not great at right guard, but they won a Super Bowl with him. I mean, he's the weakness, right? He was a weakness when Geno Smith was the QB the year before, and Geno was getting wrecked. But the health of Abe Lucas was important at right tackle. So they have their entire offensive line returning. So I think they'll be good once again offensively. Clint Kubiak's out, but once again, over the last 2 years, Sam Darnold won 14-plus games in each year and been one of the most effective QBs. And as we talked about during the season last year, if there was a mental hurdle going up against the Rams defense, who had his number in a couple games, he overcame that and then some. And I think that's a huge part with Darnold as well. He'll still have some games, I think, where he puts the ball in harm's way, but the amnesia that he has shown to bounce back from that over a 2-year period, I think, is a huge reason why you can believe in Darnold and his ability to produce going forward here.
And Kubiak leaving is a big variable in all this. I mean, he was obviously a very good coach for them. They've replaced him with Brian Fleury, who's from the 49ers environment system, right? He's been there for years in the Shanahan coaching tree and kind of working his way up the ladder in San Francisco. The last thing he was there was the tight ends coach and run game coordinator. Shanahan often does that with position coaches. They're also pass or run game coordinators. Bobby Slowick was that, right? Mike McDaniel was
Yep.
too. Like that's part of the kind of process there in San Francisco, but it's still, a fairly significant jump and unproven step to go from that to now you're replacing Kubiak as the Seahawks OC.
Just to respond to someone in the chat, I did not say Torrey Horton was slow. I said he would be the speed complement to JSN, who's got a slow 40 time, and Cooper Kupp, who has a slow 40 time. So Torrey Horton's fast. And the same person in the chat believes Clint Kubiak was not a great play caller, but I would say in a lot of their big comebacks and big games, I just saw A.J. Barner schemed wide open down the field multiple times. I thought Kubiak was very good at creating explosives schematically. Mm-hmm. And there was some scheme plays in there that were well called, well timed by Kubiak last year. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball here. Seahawks were, look, I don't know if they were better than the Texans defense. I think the Rams, though, were like the only team that had success against Seattle, and then early season Bucs. Everyone else, their pass defense is incredible. I think Mike Macdonald is now across two different places showing what he's capable of building on the defensive side. And if you were to, there's many ways to characterize Mike Macdonald's defense, too high and, what they're able to do. But when they had the 23 Ravens defense, when you just looked across the board and it's like, I don't know if there's any stars, but they are solid. Kyle Hamilton's a star maybe, but they are solid. You get the same type of vibe from Seattle, right? Like you could say Byron Murphy or Leonard Williams was ranked as the top defensive tackle among NFL executives. Maybe he's the star. Maybe, Devin Witherspoon's the star. Maybe Nick Eamon-Wari is the star, but they are very good across the board, the starting 11.
It's another thing that just shows you the fickleness of it. Nobody had Leonard Williams ranked as the number one defensive tackle in the NFL a year ago, right? Like, you're telling me that he just became that guy in the last 12 months, or you're telling me that actually Mike Macdonald is able to work some magic?
Leonard Williams is very good. And He's been very good.
But I challenge you, I haven't looked at last year's, but go and find me. Tell me, was there a single executive that ranked him number one a year ago? I don't. Because if they didn't, it feels kind of crazy to rank him number one this year based off 1 year
10 years into his career,
where Mike Macdonald rocks up with a proven defensive system and suddenly everybody plays better.
I love their depth on the defensive line. I love the DeMarcus Lawrence signing last year. I think he came good. I mentioned Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed. Super Bowl contenders usually roll 7 or 8 deep on the defensive line, and they do that. Yeah. Now, we've talked a lot this offseason who they've lost. Kenneth Walker, Boye Mafe, Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant. They've lost a few players, but they've either drafted replacements in certain cases or had people that already had stepped up previously.
But this is why the feels relative to the Rams are worse, right? The Rams have two teams, separate them by a coin flip last year, even if you say Seahawks were better last year, given that they won the Super Bowl. They were two very close teams, as demonstrated by the 3 games they played together being barely separated. So if we say they're in a very similar place coming out of last season, most of what the Seahawks have done have been losing some players, replacing some players, hoping to tread water. Meanwhile, the Rams have added a top 5 cornerback to their position of biggest need. They also upgrade from Jared Verse to Myles Garrett, the best player in the NFL, period. That's why they're better going into the season, right? Again, doesn't mean it'll materialize that way or that the Seahawks won't repeat or whatever, but they got better in the offseason relative to the Seahawks.
It doesn't mean that Ty Okada didn't do good stuff as a safety last year, or Josh Jobe. I was really impressed with Josh Jobe because he was getting targeted with Devin Witherspoon and Reek Woolen out there, and Jobe held his own. Yeah. Either way, I love the way this defense is constructed. I think you see McDonald's hand in it when they traded for Ernest Jones a couple years ago. He's been a part of some really good defenses, the free agent additions, and then the way they used Nick Eamon-Wari, who's he's become a bit more of a trendsetter now because he's 6'3", almost 230, playing that nickel spot. So he's a linebacker slot hybrid, which the NFL has always loved, but Seattle really leaned into it and said, we trust you enough that I don't care if the Rams are coming out with 3 tight ends. We're gonna keep our nickel package out there because of what Eamon-Wari is able to do. So they've got this flexibility. It's like they built the whole thing out of slot corners who can tackle, and that's fun to watch. Devin Witherspoon was everybody's favorite corner a couple years ago because of the way he hit. Eamon-Wari has that ability. So there's depth, there's scheme, and there's production on this side of the ball. So they'll be one of the best defenses once again.
Yeah.
All right. So what does that all mean? Over under 10.5 here for the Seattle Seahawks. Are they going over again? Sam Darnold, 14 wins. That's what he does. That's his floor now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's his floor, but I will go over. I think they're a very good team. I think they're worse than the Rams on paper heading into the season, but I do think that they're one of the contenders, and that puts you above 10.5 wins.
Yeah, I'll go over again. I think the NFC West is actually the best division in football because of the top-heavy nature of it. I think Seattle honestly might be better on paper this year than they were last year, even with some of the losses, because what we've seen, because we know what JSN is capable. Like, we didn't know that JSN was capable of what he did last year.
Right.
But now that we do, it's like, man, they might even be better than they were last year when they won the Super Bowl. Like you said with the Rams, doesn't mean like weird stuff happens in football games, right? But doesn't mean they're definitely going to go back-to-back, but they'll be right in the mix at the end. I would not be surprised to see Rams Seahawks in the NFC Championship once again this year.
Same.
So we'll take the over for Seattle. There you go, Seahawks fans. There's your fun breakdown for this year. 3/4 of the way through the league, Sam. We've got one more day of season previews tomorrow at 9 a.m. Appreciate everybody for tuning in and being here with us. If you missed the Easts or the Norths, go check those out on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Anything else for today?
No. I think we're done.
We caught up in good time there.
I know, yeah.
It's not bad.
I gotta get back home and drop off the child's golf clubs. I accidentally took those in the trunk of the car this morning.
Oh, jeez. Is she on the team this year? Back up?
Tryouts are Tuesday, Monday, 4th, whatever that is.
Good luck with the golf. All right, that's it for us today. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again 9 a.m. tomorrow. More Check the Mic.